Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of BRAP. It is Friday, July 17th, and the month of July is flying by. So soon August will be here. Soon September will be here. Then October, November, and an onslaught of games as we typically get in the fall. But I do have a special guest with us this evening. We have Khalif Adams from the Spawn on Me podcast. Khalif, great to have you on. Welcome to BRAP, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be rocking. I've been watching your feeds for lots of for lots of years at this point.
Thank you. No,
Just on social
no.
and other spaces. So it's nice to be able to finally chop it up and hang out in your spaces.
Yeah, no. Like I said, I really appreciate it. And we had I felt like we had kind of a pre-show of sorts. We covered a couple topics, so I thought were really interesting topics. I think we could have branched in many different directions with the topics we're talking about. The impact of things like YouTube Shorts and TikTok on children, like especially my son who's 7 years old, and that's how he consumes media, and what that potentially means for them, right? Like that generation of my 7-year-old. I forget what generation he is, but where we have all this information, they have all this information at the access of their fingertips. I mean, that's much different than how I grew up. I'm Generation X. I'm that generation who was pre-internet, but also was, kind of, we're kind of, I always look at that Generation X kind of like that bridge, right? Like we were like old school, but then we're kind of like new school a little bit. You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. But
I mean, we were the forebearers of the madness that winds up being out here now, which is kind of great. Like I don't get really upset about that part. I think it's kind of awesome that we are the folks who actually kind of ushered in the internet, and I think we are the best generation. I'll put it, 10 toes down. I believe that we are the best generation because we got the chance to understand what it was like to not have everything at our fingertips, and we had to work for it. Gosh darn it. So yeah, I think it's always cool to kind of see it through our eyes and then understand how it's all kind of morphed and evolved in front of us, which is pretty dope.
yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, I remember when the internet, my first experience with the internet in probably 1994. And I remember one of the first search engines, Ask Jeeves or ask.com.
Yep.
This is before Google. And, I remember the tech bubble, the internet bubble. I mean, it was certainly a time to be alive. I mean, having all that information and having the AOL, remember the AOL chat instant messenger? I remember getting I can't even tell you how many AOL accounts I had because I would always just get the free disc, like the the trial. Yeah, the trial. So I would always like create like a new AOL account. So
this is before the ASLing happened, because that was a huge part of our generation of people. I mean, the fact that we're probably two of the folks who are listening to this conversation alongside everybody in the chat. Shout out to everybody who's watching live. Who knows what a 56K modem sounds like?
Oh my gosh, remember that?
Right?
That beep bop bop beep beep noise, like it was, and the static.
Yeah.
And then if someone picked up the phone and try to make a call, would kick you off.
Yep.
They used to drive me nuts.
Yep. It was good times though. Like again, we struggled. We grew up in the struggle of having to wait until everybody was off the phone before you could download unreasonable things.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely correct. And yeah, just a great time. I think, and like gaming too. Like I've been gaming oh my god, since 1982, 81, 82, Atari 2600. And I'll go to my history here a little too, Khalif, and then I want to get your history too in gaming. But
sure.
I vaguely remember the video game crash of 1983. And I remember Nintendo kind of arriving, and they had was it Roy the Robot? They bundled Roy the Robot and with the NES console, and they called it the entertainment system. Years later, I would read that part of that was deliberate, that they didn't want to, because the video game crash, they didn't want to name it like a video game console. They want it to be like an entertainment device. And that's one of the reasons why they include Rob the Robot. So, but I remember that. I remember, that video game Crash. I remember Pong. I remember Pac-Man. I remember Atari 2600 is interesting because I feel like almost everyone that I knew had it. Like you couldn't I remember like walking, there wasn't a home that I walked into that didn't have a 2600. And then obviously like ColecoVision was a thing and television. It's funny, like every time I see Activision, I'm always like, I can't believe they make Call of Duty because I remember Activision for Pitfall.
Yeah. Pitfall was huge for a
Yeah.
long period of time. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm like, and by the way, Bobby Kotick was in the movie Moneyball. I didn't know that till I watched it the other day again.
Yep. That man he was in weird stuff. Yeah, he has a couple of like acting credits in various movies, and I was like, why? Why are you here?
Well, I mean,
no one watching.
Well, the interesting thing with Bobby Kotick in Moneyball is that I think he knew one of the producers, I think, and they asked him to play like one of the owners of the Oakland A's. And so here he is across from Brad Pitt. And I'm like, and I'm watching this movie with my son the other night. And he's like, and I'm like, dude, that's Bobby Kotick. And he's like, who? He didn't know Bobby Kotick. So I had to explain to him. I'm like, oh, he used to be the head of Activision Blizzard King. He was one of the guys that responsible for, Call of Duty. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So
I'm happy you gave the clean version of that.
Oh yeah. I didn't want to get into Kotick's history.
Let's look at his rap sheet. No, I'm just playing. Let's look at the allegations.
Let's look at the allegations. Exactly. This is not. You don't want to aspire to be like him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you want to aspire to have his money, but not aspire to be him in human form.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick, I do want to welcome Game Logic to the show. What's going on, Logic?
Nothing much, man. How are you guys?
Chilling.
Doing well. So we're just going over video game history real quick, Logic. Just quickly sharing my history, and I want to talk to Khalif about his history in gaming. But because we had a great conversation before the show went live about just how generations are consuming entertainment right now, and the internet, content creation, games media, which I definitely want to get back to games media because I think that's an interesting conversation. Because I think all this kind of ties into gaming history, but yeah, I like NES and the Sega Master System, Sega Genesis. I remember all that just coming through that, and then obviously, I'll never forget when Sony announced the PlayStation. I'm like, what? Sony's making a console? Like that was kind of a big deal back then because Sony was like almost king of the electronic space with the home stereos, component systems, and TVs and. Like it was kind of a cool thing to have like a decked out Sony. Like if you had the television and like, everything else Sony, like that was actually kind of a big deal back in the days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They had the really good thick foam in their packaging.
Yes.
It smelled good. It had a weird, there's a weird, because you know what it's like. There's like, people have new sneaker smell, like PlayStation 1 box smell. Like there's these weird touchstones from a generational. I remember where you were that moment kind of thing, and like really PlayStation games smelled good. I don't know why.
Yeah, and then we used to. I remember buying games just looking at the back of the box and like reading, and then if the developer had captured a couple really good screenshots and put them on the back of the box, at Babbage's, we go to Babbage's and. We're gonna buy this game, looks good, and then sometimes the games would, we learned some hard lessons doing that because sometimes the games weren't really that good. But then I remember the EGMs, the Game Pros, Nintendo Power. I remember I think it was Nintendo Fan Club, I think was the first magazine they published, and then it was Nintendo Power. And I remember getting that first Nintendo Power magazine and just, I mean, we would show, like, if I had friends that didn't have the subscription to Nintendo Power, we would, oh, here, I'm done reading it. Like, here, take it. We would kind of like share, and we do game sharing back in the days too. That was another thing. So,
when it was legal.
Yeah, Not so much anymore. But you know what though? And this goes back to like, I think this goes back to like my 7-year-old a little bit, right? Like where that they're not. I mean, I don't think they I don't know, logic. You could chime into your logic. Like I don't know if they really appreciate physical media as much as we did because they grew up in this digital age. You know what I mean? So I feel like maybe for them it's like kind of like that's their
Mhm.
expectation that everything's available on the fly. So I certainly understand that people I look I'm not saying that like no one should be upset that Sony's not going or that Sony's going to go completely digital. Like I understand that there's people who collect physical media. I'm not like I like having the option of going to GameStop and trading in my physical disc,
Mhm.
to fund my gaming hobby.
Mhm.
Um, but there's also a part of me that's learned to appreciate the convenience of just sitting on my couch and just hitting the purchase button.
I am actually I've been very surprised at the uproar, and the fact that every PlayStation social post now is followed by a no disc no buy graphic that someone made on
Yeah.
Midjourney makes me laugh a lot. 'Cause I like, and I haven't spoken about this yet. This is probably the first time I've actually spoken about it publicly about my viewpoints on all this kind of stuff because I haven't done a episode of Spawn on Me since all of these things have popped off in the past couple of months. But like, Godspeed to everybody who's finding the energy and effort to be mad about this. I appreciate you and I celebrate you. I absolutely don't care. I can't I can't find the energy to care about that thing when I look at the other things that are happening in the world currently, and looking at how much, those things are going to impact you as opposed to your consumer purchase of a thing that you wanna hold on to in those ways, and I mean, I have my own personal anecdotal stories around why I don't necessarily care, but it's just a really interesting time to see the uproar around a very specific thing and to understand that even in the totality of I understand the frameworks of why people are upset. Like, I totally understand the collectors. I totally understand the ability to hold on to these memories in those ways. I understand the angle about,
Mhm.
keeping these things for next generations and all of those things. But like, man, I wish people would take this energy and put it towards something else that mattered. And it doesn't feel like it is.
Mhm.
And again, matters is again a very wide statement and a wide range of why people care. But I'm like, man, did you not just see what they did in the Supreme Court? Like, man, did you
Mhm.
not just see what happened over here with ICE? Like, man, did you not see? I want that energy to be transferred to the things that are going to affect you in a more monumental way for a much longer time, as opposed to everyone jumping on and jumping on
Mhm.
the boycott banner,
Yeah.
boycott bandwagon for this. Like, there are some other things that might need your attention that don't have to do with you collecting stuff. So,
The Strait of Hormuz is open. No, it's not. I mean, that's that's something that
I
comes top of
mean,
mind.
our
And by the way,
Go ahead, I'm
that
sorry.
has that has impacted the industry. We talk about like rising
1,000%.
component prices. Yeah, like Logic and I have talked about this on this show. Like
Yeah.
those are things that probably, I think to your point, Khalid, probably pay attention to because those have tangible impacts to the gaming industry.
Yeah.
Shipping, the increased cost of plastics made with uh, not gasoline, but fossil fuels or whatever. You know, uh, but yeah, I mean, it's you know disruptions in the supply chain as a result of geopolitical issues or tensions globally. I mean, those are things that we've seen impact
Yep.
uh, gaming. I mean, I think to your point, like I think those are important things to pay attention to. Um,
1,000%. I mean, I remember when I worked at Intel
mhm,
and I was working in their AR/VR department and division,
mhm,
and it was like the beginnings of that real big conversation around silicon
mhm,
being
mhm,
very, very rare and trying to figure out, well, we had to build, or the company at that point was trying to build a fab to offset
mhm,
what we were seeing from a chip, lessening in terms of the shortages that we were going to end up seeing. And I'm like, yeah, those things are still kind of happening, you
mhm.
know, earth metals are running out in some forms of fashion. Like, again, it's not a it's not a if and kind of thing, and I'm not trying to 6-7 right now.
Sure, sure,
But
sure.
it is one of those things of
Yeah.
like, my hope is that when we have these discussions about these moments, it feels like the idea and the understanding of consumerism often kind of overshadows the things that are going to be moving you in a direction that is going to upend not only you, but for the future of what we all want to be able to see and be able to understand, and especially depending upon where you are in North America. Like, last night, we had a president jump online and lie for an hour and some change. Yeah, again,
Mhm.
I'm used to my government officials lying and kind of doing it the old fashioned way, not doing it in front of everybody. You know,
Mhm. Yeah,
I'm not,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm used to that
Yeah.
version of it, as opposed to having the president of the United States get up in front of millions of people and spit a lies for an hour and a half. That, in comparison to you being able to go buy your game and have it on your shelf, seems to be less important. So,
Mhm.
I try to balance those things out in my circles of influence, and try to, when I share a
Mhm.
commentary about where I'm thinking we are right now, I'm like, I love you all, but, like, this is so far down on the so far down on the scale of, like, importance and for what
Mhm.
everything means, and I'm like, "Can we take
Sure,
a step
sure,
back?
sure.
Can we take a
Yeah.
step back and look at the full totality of what we have to deal with, right? And then
Yeah,
make
yeah.
decisions based on that." But that's me on the soapbox, and we can talk about that at whatever point, but, like, come on, y'all. We can
Yeah.
figure it out, you know?
Yeah, and so Cliff, let me I kinda gave you a quick snapshot of my gaming history. Tell us about your gaming history when you started gaming, what you remember in terms of, your first console, games. I really wanna get back to the gaming media, so you walk me through kind
Yeah.
of like your experience with magazines, and we talk about the evolution of games media.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on many of the systems that you grew up on. I even, I'll be turning 48 next month. I grew up with a couple of offshoot consoles that a lot of people don't remember and don't talk about, which are like the Bally Astrocade I grew up with. I grew up with a Vextrex. All of those things alongside, the arcade scene. Shout out to the Q Lounge in the Bronx where I grew up. Um, and yeah, it's been a really dope time to be able to see the transition of everything that we've kind of um really kind of grown up with and have seen and have gotten a chance to engage with and play around with, like, those formative years of Pong, and, then Dragon's Lair, and then, all the kinds of games that came across our active, in televisions and ColecoVisions and all of that stuff. Um, it's been cool to be able to really just see the growth of all of it, which I
Mhm.
think has
Yeah,
been
yeah.
fascinating, because, we grew up in times where we were seeing 2 dots on the screen, and now we're seeing true to life photorealistic versions of ourselves, and being able to inject ourselves into some of those spaces too, which has been pretty dope,
Mhm.
to be able to see. So yeah, it's been that kind of stuff, and then moving on from, those pieces to, you talked a little bit about games media, EGMs and the Game Pros, and I remember the first kind of, like, much bigger, introduction to almost games media in the ways we've seen it now was, like, the OneUp.com era, which was really brilliant. I think that was where I got my first kind of, like, taste of being able to see, what those things look like in a real way, and seeing where we were moving from a games media
Mhm.
perspective, and being really excited about all of those pieces in there, I think has been very, very cool, and was instrumental in giving me the understanding of, like, what did I want a version of gaming media to look like, that I might be able to potentially be involved with. Um, and I think, the transition through all of those eras has been really great, because I think, being able to understand where the holes were gave me a really good space to know where I could fit into those spaces, and Spawn Unbeaten has now been in the world for, almost 15 years in some form or fashion, with
Yeah.
the blogosphere with the Spawn Point blog that I started, and got some traction with on the Sony blog on the that when that was a big thing,
Mhm.
where we did some collaborative stuff early on in my kind of media career. And then now seeing where we are now with, everybody has a podcast. The video landscape is huge and has been big for a very long time now. And how that has driven so many aspects of all of these pieces moving forward, which has been pretty dope. I think I've been very excited to see everyone kind of share their opinions in smart ways, and to be able to
Yeah.
see how all of that's kind of moved forward has been great. So it's been a very long time, in terms of me playing, since I've been playing since I was like, 5 or so, and now
Mhm.
being almost 48. So it's cool to have seen the whole transition throughout the years, and all those pieces go together.
Yeah, I think it's a great perspective to have, especially with a lot of we'll talk about this in a little bit, some of the shifting landscape in the gaming industry today. We've seen different paradigm shifts at our age, right?
Mhm,
Even from a design perspective, like going from 2D to 3D. I mean, that was a monumental jump in game design, right? And
mhm.
really, and the improvement in technology really opened. I remember you mentioned like two playing like Pong. It was basically like two little dots, you know,
Mhm.
um, to going to these full on interactive games now where we have these worlds that are alive, that are 3D modeled, that are sometimes I think blur the line between reality and fiction. Like it's gaming has just come just such a long way. Like it does things that I just never Pac-Man never elicited any real emotion from me when I was playing Pac-Man, right? I mean, maybe some anger because I got eaten by the ghost,
Sure.
um, but not the way like we have today. Like I remember playing Expedition 33.
Yeah,
Like that game punched me in the gut a couple times.
yeah,
Like
sure,
it got me the feels. I mean, Final
sure.
Fantasy 7, I was, Aerith. That's always, and every time I hear Aerith's theme song, by the way, I catch the feels. There's just
Mhm,
something about that song. So like the music, the design paradigms, like everything has changed so much and everything's
mhm.
improved.
Yep.
So um but let me ask you about Spawn on Me, because you talked about kind of the creation of Spawn on Me. It sounded like the it sounded like the motivation, maybe the thought behind creating Spawn on Me was to correct me if I'm wrong here. It sounded like maybe fill a void that maybe traditional media, and even like you said, there's tons of podcasts now,
Yeah.
right? And you and I talked about the importance of having nuance in conversations around gaming. Was that kind of the thought process of creating Spawn on Me, to just do something different? I can tell you that's why I created BRAP, because I wanted to do something different. I felt
Yeah,
like
I
there
mean, I
was,
think
yeah.
no, I agree. I think for me, it was a couple of different things. Like, one, there weren't a lot of Black folks in the space doing the work, that
Hmm.
were visible. There was, Guy Kroll, there was, Brother O'Neill, who I just lost his first name. There was Gamertag Radio with Danny, Paris, and Pete. And there were a couple other offshoots that were in that mix too. And there was, Not Your Mama's Gamer, who predated kind of all of us in terms of conversations around diversity in the space. So shout out to her, because she's still kicking around doing dope content. And yeah, it was one of those things of like, I really don't see us anywhere, and having prominence in a space or having conversations that revolve around our prism of seeing and playing games and having an
Hmm.
understanding of like, what does that kind of mean for us? While also saying, "Oh, where I know that there has to be Black and brown people who are making games, and how do
Hmm.
we talk to their experience in a way that feels smart and also, nuanced, and gives us a space to kind of like you talk about it in a real way."
Hmm.
Um, so that was kind of the impetus for it, and then the secondary layer was I was working my IT job, back home in New York, and feeling very, very pigeonholed in terms of not having a creative outlet to be able to talk about video games in the space that I love. So that was kind of the initial thrust for why Spawn on Me became a thing, and then all of those other pieces kind of came to bear in terms of, oh, you can do this in a smart way. You can talk about these things in a space and kind of hopefully share an intelligent layer of all of this while also kind of, keeping the cultural bits in there that are
Mhm,
always there. Because I think, in the beginnings of all of the media layers that we're kind of talking to, there were a ton of very stereotypical kind of
mhm,
avenues and saw, and I was like, "Well, that's not who I am as a person, so there has to be an avenue for smart discussion here that's not just me running around making faces all day."
mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so that was important to me, as a person
yeah,
who decided that I wanted to jump into this boat. Um so yeah, I think those are kind of the initial versions of why, and then that continues to expand, right? Like I think visibility became a much larger conversation. Diversity, inclusion, and equity became a much larger discussion.
mhm,
How do we again hit angles for, you know, before the kind of larger discussion around black protagonists in games were more of a scene thing.
mhm,
That everybody had their first initial two or three that they were like,
mhm,
"Oh, we're gonna talk about Barrett, and, oh, we're gonna talk about Cole, and, oh, we're gonna talk about, these 4 characters," and now that has grown to, a much larger discussion and much larger pool of characters that we can pick from.
mhm.
So yeah, it's all of those pieces combined are why Spawn and Me became a thing.
Yeah, and, let me grab the super chat here real quick. I think someone's endorsing you to run, Khalif.
I will take your vote.
Amen. Bespoke EP with a $50 Canadian says, "Amen, Khalif for president." So
I would take your vote. I will absolutely take your vote.
that's too funny. Hey, Capono, how's it going? My family's doing great. Thank you for asking. Been busy. It's been a busy summer with sports. Um, yeah. So which brings me to kind of games media because
Sure.
I Logic, you and I have talked a lot about games media. I'm not entirely, I don't know, thrilled with the current state of games media. Like everything is like everything is. I want to say everything, but to me, there's just my opinion. There tends to be a lot of this is a news item. Everything's a news item, and I get it. It's a 24/7 news cycle. They need to drive engagement, but I often feel like that's kind of watered down the conversation around gaming a little bit. Um, and even some of the headlines aren't necessarily. They're not. To me, sometimes they're not entirely accurate. I see this a lot in politics. What are your thoughts on games media? Because I growing up with EGM and Game Pro and some of these magazines, I don't think we had that. It was kind of like the story would be, oh, so and so developers working on this game,
Mhm.
or Nintendo just dropped a big announcement to a new Metroid or something, right?
Mhm.
Now it's just I don't know. It just seems like everything's like, how do we get people? How do we get eyes on our webpage? Like, and it almost feels like some of it's rage baiting at times.
Mhm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts there? I just because there are a few media outlets that I go to now. Gamesindustry.biz is
Mhm.
one of them. Christopher Dring's The Game Business is the
Mhm.
other,
Mhm.
and that's probably it. To be honest with you, Khalif. That's probably it
No,
for me.
that makes sense. Logic, did you wanna jump in first, or did you want me to jump in first? Good talk.
I don't know if Logic stepped away.
Logic might step away.
Yeah.
I think it depends, right? I think the profit margin has changed a lot, a lot of the discussions because I think, every outlet that's out there that's not an enthusiast outlet or one that is kind of, not, being held by a corporation or a business specifically that is not a personal business, um, has a different profit motive, right? And it has a different kind of intent for a lot of different reasons. I think the stuff that we grew up with was being bolstered by advertisements. Some reasons
Mhm.
why they had those in between the story pages of like who's going to be the company that's going to kind of come in and showcase their wares. I think that has changed a lot since the online movement that has happened. I think that has moved in a very different direction. I think the editorial has changed a lot. And I do think there's a proliferation of stories that don't need to be stories anymore. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
just talking for the sake of talking that has happened not only in print and online, but I think the social media space has driven that in a much broader perspective. Um, and I think that's changed a lot of it. I think that has moved things in a really weird direction for how um, people have looked at the ways that stories need to be shared. And I think
Mhm.
you add into that an online community that wants more information that it kind of knows what to deal with and what to do with on a consistent 24-hour news cycle, that changes so much of how things get disseminated, right? Like
Yeah.
Christopher got raked over the coals the other day for saying a thing out of turn, that wound up not necessarily being true, right? I think, I, as a person who's very opinionated, get dragged over the coals often. Paris and a bunch of my peers also get that treatment as well. Like, and it winds up changing, what is the way that you want to talk about things, the ways that you want to discuss those, how do you speak about those, and the motivations for why you would always get bumped up against the kind of reasonings for the moment, right? Where when I get put on the carpet by the internet, it gives various kinds of reasonings why, of like, oh, are you doing this for clicks, or oh, are you, when you get a thing wrong, what's the best way to kind of, say that you've gotten a thing wrong, or apologize for something that you said that might have not necessarily been um in alignment with where most of the internet is. And I think, as a person who doesn't care about that layer of it, like, I don't mind being an outlier in a conversation or discussion, because I either have information that I'm privy to that makes sense to me, or I'm looking at things from a different angle than most of the audience isn't, or I'm trying to get across a different angle on a discussion. Um, I think it really depends, like, but there is an overabundance of trying to figure out and trying to say things for the sake of it.
Mhm.
And that part, I think, has been detrimental to the overall discussion.
Yeah.
And it has made it harder to get real news out in the world. Like, I really do think that the folks who are doing that kind of very specific investigative journalism, like Schreier and Totillo and Rebecca Valentine and some other folks in that space, Imran Khan and some other folks in that space, are really doing some work that is very hard to do.
Mhm.
And it is something that I don't think the internet cares about as much, because there is this want to pick a side. And a lot of the times
Mhm.
when you're doing that work, it's not about side picking, it's about truth telling and trying to figure out good ways to find that nugget of information that is actually newsworthy and does actually give a space to, make people think about the industry as a different entity, and not just one as one that is based on consumer need and consumer want, as opposed to what does the industry need to be able to say about itself, and how do you kind of
Mhm.
talk to what developers and people at these studios are going through. I'm lucky enough to have worked at a couple of different studios, and that's given me a different perspective on the way that I think people should be covering news and should be talking about the
Yeah.
dev experience and how games are made. So it's a lot of different angles for all of those pieces, and I just don't think that, I don't want to pigeonhole people's careers, and I don't want people to feel like they can't do enthusiast press as the ways that I do enthusiast press. But I think there are levels to it, and I think
Sure.
those levels should be respected. And I think when people are trying to pay attention to it, you should be doing it in a way that feels smart, and you should be doing it in a way that gives space for people to share their thoughts about it. And I
Mhm.
hopefully they are trying to do it in a way that is making the audience smarter. And I think a lot of the conversations that we see in the gaming space doesn't care about making the audience smarter. It cares about getting your one off and getting your hot take off.
Yeah.
And that has a lot less value to me as a person who's been trying to
Yeah.
do it in the former way, as opposed to the ones that we see right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you mentioned Chris String. I've seen him kind of raked over the coals, and people accusing him of picking a side, or he hates Xbox, or he hates
Mhm.
PlayStation, or
Yeah.
He doesn't say this about Nintendo. It's like, no, he's reporting, he's giving you analysis based on sometimes more than often than not data, right, that he's seen or
Mhm.
conversations he's had with people in the industry. We get that sometimes here too when we provide analysis of the industry or analysis of the Xbox, the current state of the Xbox business, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I think I don't know, Logic. Maybe you agree with me here. If you don't, please chime in. But I think for us, at least on BRAP, when we talk about we had the conversation around Xbox, a lot of it's because it's at least for me, at least it's a fascinating case study, right? Especially if I go back, see people in the chat right now joking, oh, BRAP was an Xbox Live beta tester. Yes, I was an Xbox Live beta tester. I was there. We talked about 56K earlier. I upgraded to broadband so I could be an Xbox Live beta tester because I remember when I was looking up how to be an Xbox Live beta tester, you had to have broadband. And I was like, you know what? I need to get broadband. So I called up Comcast and I got broadband installed in my house and put in my my application to be an Xbox Live beta tester, and I was picked to
Mhm.
beta test Xbox, and it was one of those early, one of the things that I loved about the original Xbox was that I felt like it was really pushing boundaries, right? Had
Sure.
the internal hard drive, had the Ethernet port, which people laughed at. I remember that. Oh my God, it's got an Ethernet port. That's crazy. Like, everyone's still on 56K modem, and
Mhm.
for a lot of us who are Xbox Live beta testers, and this may sound crazy, but it almost felt like a badge of honor for us because we felt like we were helping Xbox develop something and really usher in this. I mean, Sega had online, but Microsoft was kind of taking that foundation set and just building upon that and trying to usher in something just completely revolutionary through the use of broadband. And we just felt like, wow, this is cool. We get to be a part of something cool. We get to kind of help push the medium of gaming. And if you were an Xbox Live beta tester, if you played Revolt, I mean, I'll never forget, we would play Revolt for hours. I mean, till like 4 a.m. Like it was, I don't think many of us played NFL Fever. I didn't really care for it, but Revolt was the game. If you were an Xbox
Mhm.
Live beta tester,
Mhm.
a lot of them were playing Revolt. Some were playing not Madden, NFL Fever,
Mhm.
because that was the other game that came with the disc as a beta tester. Um, but those are some of my favorite memories in the last 25 years, being Xbox Live beta tester, meeting all those people. I still have relationships with folks that I met 25 years ago through the Xbox Live beta tester program. Like it's crazy.
Mm.
Like we're all adults now. We're all, we were in our 20s at the time. Now most of us are, have kids, or late 40s. Some of us are in our early 50s.
Mhm.
Um, but it was a special time for us. And so I think for me at least, it's when I have this conversation around Xbox and just talking about the business based on financials, and sometimes we have David Faulkner, or Falky as we call him, who's a financial analyst. We'll have him kind of give his thoughts on what he's seeing in the financials because that's what he does professionally.
Mhm.
And then we kind of talk about it. We talk about the business because for me at least, it's an interesting case study to see the Xbox business to where it was a quarter century ago. We're coming up with the 25th anniversary of Xbox, to the 360 generation, through Xbox One, through this generation, and everything that's happening today. So often when we talk about it, we provide some analysis, some thoughts. People will say things. This kind of goes back to my point with Dring. You guys just hate on Xbox. It's like, no, actually, many of us are still in the Xbox ecosystem,
Mhm.
myself included. Just on the PC side, the Xbox ecosystem. Um, but a lot of the times it's just analysis, and I think that unfortunately, when you're providing that analysis or you're trying to have an in-depth conversation and you're using data or trends, people just lump that into hate, which I
Sure.
find very interesting. So, Logic, any thoughts here, Logic? I don't know if you're back. Kind of what are you there?
Good talk, Logic. Good
Uh,
talk.
I don't know. Is Logic?
I have to give him crap. I gotta give him crap.
Yeah, I don't know if he. Hold on a sec here.
Do we lose him?
I don't know. I wonder if he stepped away. I
Maybe.
don't see
More than
anything.
likely.
Yeah, I don't see anything here. Give me a second here.
Yeah,
I don't see anything in the private chat.
Yeah.
All right, Logic. I don't know. Hopefully maybe he stepped away for a second.
Yeah. He might have had some of that Taco Bell lettuce, and he's up to him.
Oh, I mean, what an interesting summer, by the way, right? We have rising gas prices. We have explosive diarrhea.
Explosive diarrhea.
The culprit, I guess, is Taco Bell, right? The particular lettuce manufacturer. I forget the name of the manufacturer, but
supposedly, yeah.
Is that? Yeah.
I mean,
I honestly have. I've stayed away from lettuce because I'm not even. I've actually stayed away from lettuce because of this. Like I don't want explosive diarrhea.
I mean, look, vegetables are evil, as we're now finding out, because it'll hurt you in some real ways. But
exactly.
No, but I think you're right. Like I think again, like speaking to the overarching space currently, I think we are in really weird times. I think we have platforms that celebrate and lift up bad actors. Excuse me, X is one of them. YouTube has been one for a long period of time.
There's Logic. I think Logic got his camera on. Now I feel like there's pressure on me to get my camera on too.
Haha.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Khalid.
No, I was just saying that, we are in really interesting times where, speaking towards like how do spaces kind of lift up bad info or bad conversation. Yeah, people are incentivized by it for monetary reasons, for clout reasons, for visibility reasons. And we're all trying to figure out the smartest ways to continue to do things in a way that feels smart and feel good about how we're trying to do those things. And when people don't care, you get a lot of the content that we wind up seeing out in the world, and that winds up being stuff that even me as a person now who is very, very left leaning and very, very progressive, there are outlets that do that work now that are kind of leading more towards that space that I even can't read at this point, because I'm like, this doesn't have anything to do with the conversations around gaming that you're thinking that they are, or you're coming at it from an angle that I'm like, well, who is this for? What does that do? Does that actually feel like you're making the conversation and the news cycle smarter, or is it you feeling like you got your feelings hurt, or the feelings that you are trying to convey are hurt ones? And we're all adults. We can have real smart discussions. We can have profound revelations about like what the industry is doing. We see the conversations and the discussions around what Xbox has been doing, both from a, even let's talk about the Kotaku article that basically was trying to say, or earlier today, something to the effect of Xbox PR is trying to do duck and cover moves for the layoffs that have happened over the past couple of days through their PR layers, right? It was like, oh, we just heard more from Bethesda about their future games coming out, and we heard about some other the stuff that happened at id that happened, and all of these companies are running PR cover for and trying to showcase and shadow over the fact that they're going to lay off almost 4,000 people, right? And I'm like, well, what do you want them to do? Like they are enacting a reset. That reset is upending and putting into turmoil a ton of people's lives. Anyone who's been covering that work, myself included, and other people have been talking about this from a industry perspective for a very long time. I don't have an expectation for Xbox PR or for the social media channels to be like, hey everybody, we're going to put out this really dope game in 2 months. Also, we just fired 4,000 people. Let's talk about that on social. Yeah, there's avenues for that conversation to happen through their dedicated channels, but the expectation for them to do both in those same ways is kind of unrealistic, right? Like, I've grown up and worked in corporate spaces. Corporate spaces don't do that work. That's not what they do. They will duck and cover, and they will do what they need to do to continue to have the consumer base be the consumer base. They're not going to do hearts and feels and hearts and minds conversations through their channels for the people that they have also disrupted. That's not the way that this works. So having expectations for that feels silly. in my mind, right? I've been through multiple layoffs. I worked on Concord, that whole studio is gone. I've worked at other places where I've been laid off. They're not going to send out a post and be like, "Hey, Con, we're really sorry, we just laid you off." That's not, you know what I mean? They're going to do business as usual and continue to do that kind of stuff. So this expectation for companies to be more human isn't what we should do, because it's not a thing that's going to happen. We have lots of hopes and dreams that those things are going to be in the mix, but like, of course, I want them to be able to say that they are changing the lives of multiple people. But I also don't have an expectation for Asha Sharma to come out and do a statement that's like, "Yeah, we just ended the career of multiple people here. Also, go buy Fallout 76." Like, those things aren't gonna happen,
Mhm.
right? They should do that thing, but that's not what's gonna happen, so why would we have an expectation for them to do that work? It doesn't make sense. I would much rather people do the work of celebrating unions and saying and putting pressure on companies like that to be like, "Hey, why don't you treat your workers better?" Or talk about, the moments in those conversations where, how do we rally around those people, as opposed to what I see on the internet most often, which is people who disparage developers and studios, people who decide that they don't want to buy games that could potentially keep them financially solvent.
Mhm.
There are ways that you can use your voice and your dollar to be able to help those people do that work, so that when these times happen, you have an actual effect on the bottom line, and effect on the way that those folk can stay employed and stay in the fields that they are trying to do, because most of those folks are actually very, very talented, and they have been talented for
Mhm.
a very long time, even if you don't like the games that they've made. So, you know, I think all of those pieces together have a much broader impact in a way that actually changes the bottom line for all the things that we care about.
Mhm.
Yep.
Logic, any thoughts here?
I can't hear him.
It's yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
A slight difference in perspective on some of those notes from
Mhm.
Khalif at the end, and I like not 180 out, like just slightly different perspective. Like that, I don't disagree with you, but
Sure.
I do feel like a couple things.
Sure.
I think it makes it difficult to hear any positivity that Xbox is putting out right now,
Mhm.
stomping on top of the layoffs, like
Sure.
and the kind of in the degrading cascade that's going on, right?
Mhm.
I so here's I mean here's a way, because I'm one of those people, right? People who feel like Xbox is putting out like PR decoy rounds right on top of like the layoff news.
Mhm.
And BRAP and I have been going back and forth about this. Like, so let's talk about the Todd Howard Bethesda miasma.
Mhm.
It, and real quick, Logic, I don't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt,
go
but
ahead. Sorry.
for
Yep.
me, like the Todd Howard stuff that just came out, I think it was today, right? Was that today? I know
Yeah.
from Bethesda Games.
Yeah. Well, Asha
That
Sharma
was
put out
that was a hard pill for me to swallow. It was because the line of work that I'm doing and where I'm located. I know a lot of people that were impacted at Bethesda HQ, and have
Mhm.
talked to some folks, and so for them, like when they hear these things, it's like it's just like a punch in the gut, right? And when you hear their stories, you hear like the disappointment and look, and I'll be frank, the anger, right? After investing so much time and effort and years and hours away from your family, to have this happen. It's, yeah, look, as a gamer, as a consumer, it's great that they've announced a new Fallout and that they're going to continue supporting Starfield. But for me, it's I immediately go to those folks that I've talked to, and that's why it makes me look at the announcement a bit side-eye, the timing of it. And I don't totally disagree with your point, Khalif, where you're like, we shouldn't treat corporations and assign like humanistic character traits to them, because they're corporations.
Mhm.
Um, they're going to do what corporations do. I mean, the company I worked for just went through rifts over the last 3 years,
Mhm.
And we weren't really talking about those things, and it's kind of like business as usual. And it was like, you would hear things, oh, we're bidding on this new business, or we're awarded this new business, but then it's like on the back end, we've just laid off 1,000 people. So it's hard. It's when you're there, you talk to people, impacted, or you've been there, you felt those things like you have, Khalif, and some of the things that you've experienced professionally.
Mhm.
It just, for me, it just makes it, again, it's just a harder pill to swallow for me personally.
And
Yeah.
to Logic's point, I
Yeah.
think I don't think anyone who has a heart is not excited about what just
Sure.
happened and what is going to be happening in the next
Yeah.
year. We still have a whole other 1,600 people who are looking over their shoulder every day, who are logging into their computer at work, at whatever studio, whatever outlet, whatever secondary, piece of the pie that's happening right now. And you're worried about, is today the day that I get the pink slip, right? That is one totally different layer of what that means for those people, what that means for their livelihoods, what that means for all the people who have, come in, who are just now either entering the workforce in the games media, I'm sorry, the game space, and now finding themselves jobless, all the way up to the people who were there for multiple years and decades, who are now out of work, who, if you believe that ageism is a problem, who will then have to try to figure out what that looks like for them moving forward if they did not get a
Yeah.
really, really hefty severance package and
Sure.
maybe some golden handcuffs, a golden parachute, in those ways. But I do think that, like, the expectation that the brand is going to not say anything doesn't make sense to me. Now, there's a difference in saying, do you wanna say anything? Or do you wanna say and continue to do the marketing that you're going to continue to do? I think as a business, the
Hmm.
company is going to continue to try to sell you as a consumer and as a customer,
Hmm.
because everything that they've said in the past month, in the past, again, these layoffs are not new layoffs in comparison to the multiple months of layoffs that have happened we're just talking about Xbox currently. Those folks are going to try to do everything to continue to find new customers, the people who are lapsed customers, the people who are still in that mix, because all of these things supposedly are in service of keeping that part of their business unit solvent. There's no business that's going to be losing money that's going to just go quiet once they've done a bunch of layoffs or a bunch of other negative things to their overall ecosystem, because they're trying to save their own asses. Like, we all know this. The need for them to have you buy their next console is going to be paramount. The need for them to continue, they had their Xbox sale the other day, the start of the other day. They're gonna still try to market to you. Those things are not
Hmm.
gonna move the needle in those conversations. You want those things to be, you know, cognizant of the elephant in the room,
Hmm.
but, like, most people aren't gonna bring up the negative thing when they want something positive to happen in their purview, right? They're not gonna
Hmm.
try to give you, "Hey, this piece of cake has a roach in it." Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they're not gonna do that off jump. That's not the way that any of these things work. Now, mind you, again, we want those things to live in the same space and be able to deal with it. But we've seen a consumer base that doesn't know how to deal with negative or positive news in a reasonable way. So
Mm.
my hope again is that there is some, because I speak to folks behind the scenes all the time. I've reached out to numerous people who have gotten laid off. I've been actively trying to help people who are, who have lost their job or who are looking to find new work and to connect them through the networking avenues that I have. And the conversations I have behind the scenes is like, no one is happy and everyone's scared. We know
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
but to not feel, but to for these articles to come out and for people to have this understanding or inkling that those parts of the cogs of those wheels are not going to continue to spin, that just doesn't seem realistic to me, and I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Logic. Go ahead. Yeah.
say
so
logic.
the things that this kind of episode has caused me to consider is one. I mean, so let's go back to when these layoffs were first starting to be announced, and one of the first things that I said to to BRAP when the Fallout thing came out is I said a thing that nobody's talking about and that people are missing is that the consideration that if that happened, then theoretically somebody talked to Todd right before that announcement came out and said, look, I get that like maybe Fallout has been your baby and it's been in the vault, but Obsidian's going to do Fallout, right? And those conversations can go one way or the other, and they can be approached one way or the other. Like one way to approach it is this is not a conversation, right? I'm telling you that they are going to do Fallout. You can give me your opinion on like how you think that should be done, but like we're not having a conversation about like whether the decision's being made. It could also be a thing of, you know, trying to help Todd or coach him to like get to this thing. And kind of the thing that came out today kind of in some ways sounds like a Cory Barlog God of War thing, right? It's hey, you know, now, you know, we're raising up Todd to be this Kevin Feige of the Fallout, you know, cinematic universe, and we're going to do all these things. And that sounds cool. But there's a couple problems with the optics on it, right? In terms of how it gets handled. One thing is in order to belay the suspicion, you put that out at the same time that you're talking about this reorg, right? You say right then they put the announcement out first, and then this thing follows up as a lag, which makes it just seem weird. Another thing is this. I've had a lot of problem with, you know, the topic. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that they're going to market to you. And I understand that everybody's not looking at it with this optic. But when I look at how all the domino pieces, right, are arrayed, you're saying, I mean, let me just go ahead and talk about the whole Bethesda thing and throw Elder Scrolls into it. But your Elder Scrolls is on track for release in 2028. But that studio has been schwacked. And just mathematically, quantitatively, you cannot put out software on a schedule you were on with less people, right? Then you impact ZeniMax Online Studios, and there's so much volume from that corner about, you know, everything's fine, you're still going to get content, but we're just gonna go dark for a while and go in the closet and rework the roadmap and get that out to you, but we're still doing stuff. But I said, when that happened, I said, because Bethesda now needs help to get Elder Scrolls 6 out, because you said Elder Scrolls 6 was your priority, but you knocked out a big part of the studio, but you're saying you want those software titles faster. Like those three things don't sync up.
Yes.
So the problem that I've had throughout this is that the voice track is constantly out of sync, right? It's we're doing this one thing, but then we do this other thing, and I'm like, well, those things don't match up. Then here comes the Todd Howard thing. So I think one, just the proximity and the gap time between the two makes it a little difficult for people to swallow. The other thing I think is you could also have somebody else say it, right? But part of the problem, and I think this is a huge problem, is right from a PR perspective, and I'm talking about the business case from it, like the media aspect of it is, Asha Sharma starts off as this golden child, right, who's doing all these positive things and doing all these helpful things, and she crosswalks straight over to being, you know, what's the word I'm going to use? Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of the. I'm trying to think of the name of the lady in Ghostbusters. Right?
Oh, Zool.
Zool. Yes.
Those are the Ghost
exactly. She was Zool, right? And then
Brittany Weaver.
What was it? Yeah, I know.
What do you want the form of the Destructor to come as?
Yes. Basically? Yeah. So she just crosswalks right over that without breaking stride, without taking a breath.
Sure.
And I'm like, so everybody's got whiplash about that. And then
I don't know why though. I don't know why. But keep going. But I want to come back to that point because I think it's a really important point.
Right. And then you pack onto this Todd Howard announcement, which kind of, I mean, to me at face value comes across as, hey, so since this thing has been going down, everybody's been worried about Todd. Todd hasn't said anything. What's going on with these games? All these studios around him are a swirl. Let me go out and say something to quell things. And this is, of course, a pattern of behavior where when you look at Xbox as a business, we now feel like this has happened several times, right? Business update of February 2024. we come out and talk about only 4 games because rumors have been swirling for 2 months that games are going over to PlayStation. So there's this pattern, there's this repeated pattern of news is swirling, rumors are swirling. Let's get out and put something out.
Mm-hmm.
So again, my thing is gap, proximity. When do you put the announcement out? Who do you have put the announcement out? Was the point I was building up about Asha. Because the thing that's really strange to me, super strange to me, is that since this whole thing started, in fact, since right after the showcase, there hasn't been a word from Matt Booty. And the two of them were tied at the hip when she turned over. Now that everything is going down, and to me, and I think this is the reason she puts the announcement out today, because when you start stacking these things and looking at the math, there's a serious problem with the production pipeline. Again, just like it was in 2022. I'm sitting here looking at this, and I think I get why the announcement came out today about all the projects, because when I lay out the studios that are left and what people have just put out and how long it takes to put a game out, I'm looking at a slate and I'm like, I don't know what is coming out from Xbox first party in 2027 and 2028, because I don't see anything coming out till 2029.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, so part of my question today is like, why not have Matt Booty put that out, right, about Fallout? Why not between Asha and Matt do some type of divide and conquer where either somebody's putting out the bad news and then somebody puts out the good news, or some type of work share, which it seems like previously has almost always been the case. But now that it's not the case right now in this moment of time in this crucible, it seems very strange, and it causes even more questions.
I think, let me share something because we're in alignment on the production pipeline part. I don't know if you saw this, but I tweeted this out earlier today, and I'll just read it really quickly. It says it'll be interesting to see where if we get more air quotes. Here is what we are working on posts for more Xbox studios after we saw what we saw from today's Bethesda announcement. It says happy to see them continue to support Starfield 76 and creators. Fallout 5 is in pre-production, and that makes a lot of sense to me since they're probably heads down mostly on Elder Scrolls. All of that said, what fans really need to hear from Xbox management alongside these studio messages is how and if these recent firings have changed those projects' estimated timelines. With their most anticipated games still coming years away and the business reset being supposedly a catalyst to streamline that process, does this add more or less time to players getting those games fast enough? Does this add more or less time to players getting those games fast enough to get the business moving towards being healthy? And that aligns a lot with what you just talked about, Logic, because I think what the good cop, bad cop version of what we wind up seeing now is why you don't, in my estimation, see that kind of balance between Matt Booty saying these things and Asha Sharma saying these things. And the reason I think that is because Asha has a lot of leeway currently. One, just in the organization structure, she's the top of the list, right? She gets to dictate a lot of the potential maneuvering inside of the business unit and how they kind of want to move forward, and she has a mandate to kind of have free reign to do what she needs to do. I think in that particular capacity, you get to be the bad cop, right? I think in Matt Booty's case, he gets to not have to do that part of the job in that way, or he's doing it in kind of different avenues. Like, I think we saw a really interesting moment that happened in the previous kind of last version of the public discussions coming from, here's a discussion that we want to kind of get ahead of. And that got a lot of backlash from the community. And that was the last time Matt Booty was on the Xbox podcast with Tina Amini and Jeff Rubenstein. And that was the discussion around like exclusivity that wound up coming out in that way. Matt is not doing that work of setting the charter for who got fired across those studios. I think that directly comes from Asha having the discussion with all the folks who are connected to the P&L, all the folks who are connected to where that routes up to Satya. I think all of those.
Can I interject in that just as one question? So, because this is a big question that's swirling, right? We're hearing the thing of from certain corners, right? Some of the former employees, some of the current employees, that these cuts didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense who they pulled.
Sure.
Like we can't build a game this way. Right. Like you've knocked out the effectiveness of like certain functional groups, right?
Yep. I agree.
So now you've got a gap, right?
Yeah.
So part of my question to you, like in the comment you just made, Matt Booty should be part of that discussion, right? I mean, part of the thing that should have happened, and I get with you about the P&L. P&L is another problem. You have no COO for the last 4 years, so or forever. So who is in charge of P&L, right? Who's responsible for budgets and schedules and staffing with regards to projects that normally rolls through P&L? So there was no COO in place. So I assume P&L was somehow split between Sarah, Phil, and Matt. I would have hoped Matt would have had visibility on P&L at the studio level. But however it got done, like there should be a voice in this. This is the impact this is going to, like, when I was at a Fortune 500 company and we went through 4 straight years of layoffs, part of the big conversation was whenever these things were going to go down, right? PMs, right? Frontline management rolling up through the strategic business unit leaders. Conversation on, hey, if this person goes away, what's the impact to your project? What are the big strategic projects going on in the building? What are the ones that are core to our business? What are the ones where, like, if we knock this out, this customer is going to have like no tolerance for us being off schedule? So like, as I'm looking at this production pipeline, and I wanted to ask you some questions about the production pipeline too. Matt should be a core voice in that, and he should have been a key decision maker, right? Or part of the council, right? And giving those inputs to Asha to come down to on the final decision. And so I'll just mention that, and before I turn it back over to you, like, one thing I want to talk through is like, how does this roadmap, right? If the roadmap is a gap, and I want to go through them line by line, if the roadmap is a gap, and the gap is right at the turning point where Project Helix should be landing somewhere, if we're still going to do Project Helix, what does that mean for the business, and how is it being run on the left, the ending left side of Gen 9 and the entry point of Gen 10?
Well, like, I have to caveat everything with, again, everything that I'm sharing in terms of like how the BU is being run, who has the the driver on how these decisions are being made. This is all speculation. No one knows, right? Like, I can say that out loud, and that'll be the best answer for a lot of this stuff, because I don't know. I'm guessing based on history. I'm guessing based on how I know organizational structures to work. I'm guessing based on what I've seen so far from the kind of Xbox management layers of it. I think, and this when it comes back to, like, I think, which is Matt absolutely probably had to have some input in some of those conversations for sure. I think the larger discussion of how we get to where we are now is when you get smatterings of this kind of through the messaging that has already come out from Asha and the things that have been discussed, right? Like the discussion about the business not being healthy, the discussion about and kind of maneuvering of the selling and kind of handoffs of the studios that were in there, the compulsions, the Double Fines, all of those things now being kind of moved, Ninja Theory is being moved into these kind of nebulous spaces where they now have to go find publishers for themselves now and go back to being independent. I think a lot of that decision making, and this comes from even some history of me seeing and being laid off into some of these spaces and seeing like, oh, well, you are coming in to just get us into the black, right? Like your job, no matter what, hell or high water, is to get us into the black in some form or fashion, or get us closer to it in this, from now until the ending of 2027 or 2026, get us closer to where that space may wind up landing. And these are the things that you're going to have to do to be able to get us closer to that space. I think one of the discussion points that happened earlier on when she first got the job was everyone bubbled up the like, oh, she's just the person who's here from the AI layers of the business, and this is what she's going to come in and do. what does she have to do with gaming, and does she have any knowledge about the gaming space, and does she have any affinity for it? Does she have any reverence for it in any form or fashion? And I think what we're seeing is her learning about those things in the same ways that Sarah Bond did, right? Like, if you think about where Sarah Bond came into the equation, she came from telecom for most of the time that she was working in those spaces, in the tech spaces. She then became a much larger cog of the Xbox ecosystem, and she learned a lot through that first year of, oh, why does this matter to this consumer base in these ways? I think there's an even different split now in terms of where Asha comes in, that knowledge of what does it mean to be a part of a gaming ecosystem, that understanding of what the community, and she got a big dose of that with all of those pieces that you talked about earlier, which were the kind of coming in and being this kind of golden child to the community. And I was on the outside of those discussions initially saying, y'all are messing this up. You really don't understand, like, this is a business move. Y'all are coming into this, like, again, the whole parasocial layers of all of those things that people were mad about when people see me at an event and being like, "Oh, you hanging out with Phil Spencer and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
Why are you making these parasocial, relationships and all these things?" And I was like, "You do have to understand that, like, I'm almost 49-year-old man. I'm an adult. I've worked in multiple places, and I understand that there's a difference between us being cool, you being the homie, and you being the CEO of a company. There are differences in the
Yeah.
ways that all of those relationships maneuver, but the community jumps into it and being like, Asha said a really nice thing, and she put out a graphic that changed the way that now our Xboxes are all capital letters. Oh, she put out this thing that is now I can put this on the backsplash of my Xbox console when I boot it up. Now she is the homie. And I'm like, y'all don't understand. She is coming in to do business things for a business BU that has been described and talked about for multiple generations as a loser of profit for a much larger company. These are not difficult things to understand if you're looking at it logically and you're looking at it from that business perspective. So it goes back to that conversation of, do I think that the current decision making process that has happened across all of these studios is going to get them games faster? Absolutely not. You need as many people on board to be able to do that thing in the ways that you want to, even if those folks were still employed at those companies. There was a lot of churn in a lot of those development discussions. We were still behind the curve if you were an Xbox fan in terms of seeing how quickly those games are going to get made. I specifically will talk about the stuff at Bethesda. The thing that is confounding to me is, again, if you're going to fire all those people, and you don't have other resources that you're going to put out, unless you start to do that thing in co-dev that is going to happen outside of the country in the places that are cheaper, because there are tons of places outside of the US that are doing development at cheaper rates. But does that quality still come through in the game that you got?
Well, I
You've
just
lost? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
just to jump in on that one point. So I think the
Yeah.
codev is ZeniMax Online, and this is my problem with like how all these points of light to me don't feel in sync. Take a schwack at ZeniMax Online, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Take a schwack at Bethesda, still going to do Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
But that seems to me like, well, the plan probably is to have ZeniMax Online help, like almost as a codev, Bethesda. But I'm like, if that's the case, then everything is not truing up, right? Then obviously that's going to have an impact on Elder Scrolls Online, right? And I feel like,
1,000%.
like, is that something we're not being told yet, right?
Of
And
course not.
that's where we kind of get some of these
Yeah,
things. But go ahead, sorry.
of course, no, of course not. Like, I don't think these are the conversation pieces that will be displayed publicly in a very, like, the beauty of, and I say this with an air quote, right, is the beauty of where, and a reasoning why I not applauded the ways that Asha has been talking about these very demonstrably bad things that are happening. But I think the conversations that we wind up having in games media and the conversations we have across games communities is very, very surface in a lot of different ways. Because one, I just don't think that the community cares enough to understand the minutia of how games are made, alongside the obfuscation that winds up happening in PR discussions and PR speak, alongside the the tumult that winds up happening when you upend everything like this has done for a lot of these spaces and a lot of these studios. So it winds up being, yeah, I'm sure, ZeniMax will probably be more co-dev than working on ESO, right? They'll still have a Tiger team that's doing a lot of that stuff. Or the Tiger team will be the people who are, helping on that co-dev stuff. I remember some of the stuff that happened when I was working on Concord, where we had folks in XDev on PlayStation who were literally helping the team continue to fix and finish some of the things that we were working on at Firewall. Like, there were pieces of that stuff that is a part of a larger discussion of, like, how does codev work? What is codev supposed to be? How integrated is that in your entire team? All of those things matter in that space. But again, it goes back to the misalignment that you're speaking to, which is the need is for games to come out faster so that we can continue to figure out good ways to uphold and sustain the business. The thing that is different is the fact that we are in a space where video games take a very long time. They have a certain amount of bodies you have to throw at it to get it done within that time. And when you remove all of those people, you have to figure out a technological gap, which potentially could be AI, which I don't think it is because it's not there yet. Or you wind up dumping a ton of the people who are highly paid, you supplant them with lower paid employees, and you restaff, which is happening within multiple industries that we wind up seeing across multiple tech spaces. We've seen it with AI, the most kind of blatant version of it, where people are being rehired after this finding out, oh, all the stuff that we thought AI was going to do doesn't actually do that. And we need smart people to actually figure that stuff out. I think where we go now is, and this is probably speaking towards the Matt Booty layer that you're discussing, is you should hopefully have an advocate within that space who can say, these are the people that we absolutely positively must keep because they hold all the institutional knowledge. They have the ability to kind of work us through the tough times when we are kind of running lean. We also don't want to engage in more crunch, which is probably absolutely going to happen with development that we're going to wind up seeing in the next couple of years. And it goes back to that stuff that we saw of, like, who's the good arbiter, the person that's supposed to deliver the message. Todd Howard, sure, you give him the baton to deliver that message because it makes some sense for him to be able to do it because he's the figurehead, because he is the person who has been the most vocal from that perspective in terms of those specific IPs. And you don't hand that off to people who kind of don't have any gravitas with the audience, right? Matt Booty is not the person that you want to push out for a lot of these discussions because he just doesn't have that gravitas with the audience. Asha still is new enough that she is still figuring out how to ride that wave and figuring out how to best kind of lay those things out alongside all those parts from Xbox communications and PR, right? So she is getting some grace in some of those spaces, even when the negative news is still coming out, right? You'd go back to some of those articles that we talked about earlier. The folks who are the most upset about those are more folks who are industry adjacent or folks who are working in the media landscape. Audiences are like, gimme. You know what I mean? Like, audiences in the grand scheme are like, I don't care. Give me the thing that I want to spend money on. So it winds up being this really hard thing to spin, while also the people who are paying attention, the folks like us in this conversation, the folks who are listening at home, who do kind of understand at least a tertiary understanding of how games get made, that as soon as you drop down resources, you're going to make everything harder for getting that game out faster or in a completed state that isn't going to need a ton of dev work to fix the things that are going to potentially be broken. I don't know how much Asha knows of that process, and I don't know if that is a driver for her in the way that she is making decisions. That's where Matt should be coming in and helping to bolster those decisions, or helping to figure out good ways to alleviate some of the potential pain points that are coming from those larger decisions that are coming down the line. I just don't know, because I'm just not in those rooms to be able to make that decision. But I hear from other people, again, like no one is happy about the way things have moved, and no one is happy about the runway of getting to where we're supposed to get to this new future where Xbox is more solvent and safer and feeling those ways. We're going through a very deep dip with the hopes that you're going to come out of that other side in a space that is more productive and finding good ways to fix process, which was a big part of the conversation for that last the reset email that you talked about. A lot of that was about process, not practice, but process. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not talking about practice, we're talking about process. And that's a very CEO, HR, PL, bottom line. These people are too expensive. How do we fix that? And you wind up throwing a lot of the babies out with the bathwater, and that's where we wind up kind of landing now. That was
Yeah,
a very long explanation for a very good question, but I hope that kind of gives at least some version of at least where I'm looking at it, and potentially some clarity on where hopefully we wind up kind of moving.
Yeah, that's another thing is strange to me is in, you know, with the email that talked about the redundant processes across a lot of the studios, and then, you know, and then the reset email. I'm very surprised that in all this you know, shuffling of musical chairs on the deck, that, you know, we still haven't heard, you know, a notion of a, you know, consolidated CI/CD pipeline, shared service center, like you know, pulling the people out of the studios that are all doing the same thing, that it doesn't necessarily make sense for, like, you know, 10 different teams to be doing the same thing at 10 different studios. You know, we haven't heard inklings of that. So that'll be interesting to see them get around to that, because
I don't think we'll hear about that, though, to be fair. Like,
I don't think she will.
I think we nerd out about that, though.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think she will make an announcement about it. I'm saying that, you know, that we hear through various channels and through other reporting that, you know, not necessarily on Front Street, right? But that there has been that consolidation, because that's a cost saver, right? You know, I don't need I don't need, you know, 10 DevOps people like at 10 studios. So now I have 100 DevOps people, right? When I could do it with 20, you know, across 10 studios.
But where it gets tricky is because all of the, like, one of the things I used to ask a lot when I would go and talk to developers at GDC, Games Developer Conference, and other places like that, is for those studios that were kind of adjacent, right? So, like, in the Call of Duty studios, you know, Treyarch and Infinity Ward, how much development knowledge was being like development knowledge, platform knowledge, technical expertise, and technical tools were being shared across those studios, right? And some of that stuff was being shared, right? But so many things were very bespoke in a lot of different ways. Like, I didn't know until I worked into a studio that everybody for a long period of time was using basically bastardized modded versions of Unreal Engine 3 and 4, right? I didn't know that. I was like, hey, everybody, oh, y'all using Unreal? That's dope. Everybody uses the same engine. This should be easy for y'all to make games. No, they are shoehorning features and understandings into those engines to make their very specific version of their games. A photorealistic Call of Duty game is running on Unreal Engine 3 or 4. Now it's 5 and moving into 6. Games that I worked on were running on the same thing, but if you looked behind the hood, they were totally different in the ways that they were kind of using that stuff, because an action adventure game is using that engine in a totally different way than a first person shooter is using that engine. It's a lot of those learnings that I didn't know and understand until I got a chance to be able to see those things and talk to people about, like, oh, what are you doing to make that work? And the example that you had of, like, oh, we have these 20 folks who are working behind the scenes on networking or whatever that may be. They may have a foundational understanding of, like, here are the protocols and things you need to make those things work. But, like, when the rubber hits the road, they're all using very different bespoke versions of that technology to get the thing done that they want to get done. So it winds up not being redundant.
Well, I disagree with you, and I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you that is their state. I disagree with you, like, I would argue that that shouldn't be the state. I would argue that that is an improvement you do need to make. I would argue that that is the theoretically exact thing she was talking about multiple studios, some of whom are working on the same technology, doing things different ways, and therefore driving cost in a way that's unnecessary. In an era where the entire industry, right, and especially large publishers, need to find those efficiencies within their organization. Like commonality in terms of technology, tool sets, utilities needs to be a bigger topic, particularly when you have a very large organization all within inside one wall that you have control over. Like, to me, that is a maneuver that you should be trying to execute and pull off.
I think that is the what's the word? That is the aspirational goal, right? I think when the reality of that hits, I think it is something in which it goes back to kind of the former thing that I was talking about. It would be nice if, right? That would be dope. And that takes time to get to that point for some of that stuff. I think this is a big marker also of the way older development worked in comparison to what kind of newer development looks like. I think one of the discussion points that I was talking to a friend about was, what's the big difference between the way that Phil Spencer and, Sarah Bond were running the business in comparison to the way Asha is running the business now. I was like, well, there is a part of that work that I think Phil understood because he had worked with developers for most of his life, in most of his professional career, where you're having those very specific discussions and going through that and working through that and trying to figure out solutions and trying to figure out ways to help that pipeline move in a really good way. And then you have Asha come in and she's like, well, none of this makes sense because y'all all do the same thing. We got to cut that. Again, this is a very easy version of that in my mind, but I think you're right in terms of like where it should land and what should be the potential output of what that looks like in the grand scheme. I just think it takes a lot longer than the timing that she's had to do that analysis and to do those actual full changes, because you know what it's like to change a full technical stack. It's not easy to change a tech stack for some people in those ways because of the bespoke versions of how some of that works.
Yeah, and I'm not putting it all on her. I mean, when it comes to like who is in charge of the company, I am entirely abstracted from that. Like that's Xbox's problem to figure out, right?
Yes.
My point is, you've been consolidating studios since 2017, 2018. You have multiple studios maneuvering towards, a certain commonality of technology in terms of engines. You have some studios digging their heels in and refusing to make that move, Bethesda. You have some studios who eventually make the move because just eventually they have to take the shot in the face, right, multiple times until they finally figure it out. 343i, right? But my point is, like, but from a leadership perspective, maybe you programmatically, right, decide that, hey, that is a key way that I'm going to use my business. Josh mentions it in the chat, and I'm not saying that the Frostbite is the be all end all answer to everything. I'm also not saying that EA is maneuvering towards Frostbite as a technology commonality across its studios obviates what you just mentioned, which is that people can still be on the same engine. But because game development does not happen simply on the engine layer, right? There's the end. We talk about engine, which is very much akin to, just to make it simple for everybody, kind of like SDK-ish almost. Mm-hmm. But that engine gets packed, right, with a ton of tools and utilities, some of which can be, Bob the builder who's been at the studio for 25 years has some script, right, running on his desktop that nobody else has, right, because it hasn't been properly configuration managed. And that's part of how a thing, an asset, or a particular function or feature within the code, right, is developed, right? He sucks in some huge spreadsheet from the physicists who are making like the model, and then by out pops a particular object or entity. So that's like, and that's the type of stuff that can be different across studio to studio. And then you atomize that and flower it out and multiply it, right, in terms of complexity, and that's how you get to these studios who can be on the same engine but still be significantly different. But my point is, again, from a leadership perspective, and again, with Asha, she brought in she appointed somebody to be the technology officer for the business unit. Again, you've got Matt, whoever is whoever, my point is you've been consolidating things since 2017 and 2018 in a tech space that is a target that you should be taking a shot at in terms of trying to get everybody more so oriented around a common tech stack. And I get there's legacy and all that stuff, but this goes back to Phil's comment about they sometimes have a difficult time bringing in new acquisitions and getting them to align to the Xbox way of doing things. But like I said, that's not a silver bullet. I just mentioned that as an aside.
No, and I think it's important. But I also think that it's like, and to a certain extent, like one of the conversations I see is the professional learnings layer of it, right? Like that happens at GDC every year, right? People are going and trying to figure out what's the new thing to kind of help them do their job better, faster, and more proficiently. The times in the times that you would think that would happen the most are in between projects, but also depending upon the project that you're doing, you're not going to stop and shut down all production to kind of do that other thing. Like you may set on a Tiger team to go do the learnings and then bring that back in a we used to call them lunch and learns or brown bag sessions, and you basically bring all those back into the company and say, hey, I went to this conference and these are all the things I learned, and let's kind of try to figure out good ways to incorporate into the way that we do things here now. Some of that happens, some of that doesn't happen. Like you said, it is those kinds of problems that we have of who are the people who are hoarding knowledge, who are the people who do own the thing. There are so many human levels to that too that are across every tech center and every job that I've ever worked at, where they're the people who are the ones who are willing to learn a thing, and they're the people who are not willing to learn a thing. There are the people who are the holders of information, and some people are really free with it. Some people hoard it. There are so many human elements to all of that too, that I think consolidation of the tech stack and kind of learning where those things move and how to finesse that and to get everybody on board, that is a very difficult thing. And if you think about then the multitude of studios, the geolocation of where that winds up happening, the transition of how fast technology moves, the ability to jump onto something new and be like, oh crap, that whole thing was buggy and not ready yet. We just tried to move a whole bunch of stuff to that and it didn't work. Like there's so many conversations within that I think, like you said, there isn't a silver bullet, and you hope that during those conversations that becomes a much larger discussion of how to do that part well. But I think, again, it is a very difficult thing to move an entire, aircraft carrier all at the same time and have an expectation for it to run as smoothly as it does if you're running, a much smaller ship. So I think it depends. It depends on so many different parts of what that looks like. And I hope too, because I think it changes how fast you can do things and how well you do those things. But also, I don't have an expectation for it to be as quickly as, again, Asha has been there less than a year, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm abstracting from Asha, right? So my timeline I'm running on is like 2017, 2018. And I don't disagree with you. Very complex problem. Requires very strong leadership. Requires very strong connectivity, communications, like esprit with your senior technical leadership. Yep. It requires really good succession planning too, right? Is a big part of it.
Yeah, so, 1,000%. Yep.
So one thing I want to do with you real quick, and I'll try to make this real quick because I'm sure BRAP wants to talk about other stuff. I do want to kind of do a quick swap papers and compare notes, grade each other's papers. I just want to run down the list and ask you, I just want you to just give me a year. When do you think Machine Games gets out the next Wolfenstein game?
Probably the next 2 years.
So you think 2028?
Probably, maybe.
Okay.
They're pretty nimble.
Okay. When do you think? So we've got Halo Combat Evolved coming out this month.
Yep.
When do you think Halo Studios gives us the next Halo game, and what is it?
Probably another 3 years or so. I mean, I think the Halo Evolved version of it is a showcase of the forebearers of what the next thing is, right?
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of mechanics are going to change in there. I don't think a lot of the models are going to change that much because it looks really, really pretty. I can't say much because I'm under embargo.
Yep.
But I think with where they are now in that particular game, I think that's probably like another 2 years, maybe.
Okay. Do you think it is an entirely new Halo thing, or do you think it's like Halo 2 remake?
It needs to be a sequel because I think it can't be another remake. They need
So you
to
think it'll
just,
be like Halo 6,
especially because it's
6, 7, I guess.
yeah, because the Combat Evolved has no multiplayer in it, so they need to put out something that's going to be multiplayer that has multiplayer in it, and I think that'll be the next thing.
Okay. So you think it'll be something like Halo 7 2029?
Probably.
Okay. When do you think Obsidian gets its Fallout game out?
The Fallout 5?
Yeah.
Or the New Vegas stuff.
Yeah, not any of the remasters, just like the new Fallout game that Obsidian is supposedly tasked to work on. When do you think that comes out?
I mean, it has to come out before Bethesda's one comes out, and Bethesda's one is probably not going to be dropping for at least another 5 years, probably. Because if you think about Elder Scrolls being the next game that they're really kind of heads down on, which needs to be the fastest one, and that one is already probably 3 to 4 years out. Fallout 5. Again, this depends on a couple of different things.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, this is not a yes or no question. It's a yes or no
Okay.
answer, even though that's what you asked for. Because I think the pipeline, unless they are getting extra help, which again, we just talked about that. Where do you get that from? I think all of these major projects, Fallout 5, Elder Scrolls, these are like 4 to 5 years out. I think you get Elder Scrolls first, then you get something in between that comes from Obsidian, and then you have the big Fallout 5, 6, whatever that winds up being after that. Again, these are like, we're in a bucket of 5 to 7 years of where it winds up working in my head.
So you think you think Elder Scrolls 6 is like 2030?
I think that's the next one. I think that's probably 29, or
Okay.
at least
So
29 or 30. Maybe the fastest is 28, but even then, that's probably pushing it with the amount of people that they lost.
Yeah.
So that's that means it's a Helix game. If
it has to be a Helix game at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said Bethesda would be first out of the gate. So you think Fallout 5 is like 2030 from Obsidian?
No, I think Obsidian, because if you think about where they're at, and I'm trying to catch them all together. The remakes are coming out. They shouldn't be that hard to make. I don't know. The thing is, I don't know what that Obsidian game is supposed to be. Because my thing is this too. Like, I think a lot of the conversation that people have been talking about has been, they have this expectation for all of these games to kind of just come out now, right? Like, oh, well, Asha has made the decision that like all these big titles and IPs are going to be in the mix. Again, that means you're starting to do another offshoot of an offshoot of an offshoot. Are you going to be doing a Fallout game that's based around the television property? I don't know. Like, what does that mean for Fallout 5 or 6? Whatever that's going to wind up being, which needs to be a big, big thing when you're already doing another big, big thing as Bethesda. What do you do that doesn't include IP fatigue in a space, because you're then churning out stuff all the time, which is a thing that I was beefing about before. Was like, sure, you want to now lean on all these things and not have really interesting new stuff. They would have to either do something that's a new IP that is tagged on to that new space and tagged on to that IP, or you have to do something that is totally different in that space. And I don't think they have the leeway to do that because fans don't want new stuff. They're not buying new stuff. New IPs are dying all the time right now. So if you're going to lean on that IP and you're going to say, this is the thing that we're going to drive with you, it has to be very similar to the things you kind of know and love. And then you wind up cannibalizing your own space because you've now put a thing up by Obsidian, and now you put out a thing by Bethesda in that same universe. How does that work? That's a question that I have that I haven't heard answered either. So timing, next 4 to 5 years, either way. But like, how do you then maneuver that and position that in a way that makes them feel different? That's another conversation. Sorry.
So if id does another Doom or Quake, when do you think that'll be out?
They just put out the DLC this past month, or this month. If they're doing 2016 levels of stuff, which is what they said, they are now structured to do in terms of team size. Again, that's another Helix game. That's like early Helix, maybe, which is another 2 to 3 years away.
Okay, we'll say 2029.
Sure.
Playground. They're about to put out Fable.
Yep.
I'm not gumming up the works trying to figure out what's going to go on with Fable like as a franchise. So just thinking about the Forza Horizon studio, they just put out Forza Horizon 6. When do you think we get the next Forza Horizon?
I think they're going to be doing a lot of co-dev on Fable. And they're both like two mini studios together, basically at this point, putting out two titles. I think Forza then becomes an every 2 to 2 year kind of thing.
Okay.
Because you need enough time to kind of put it out. You need enough time to have space for it. And you need to, again, if you're cutting people out, you need the resources a bit to kind of bounce between the projects, right?
Yeah.
So
well, I haven't heard Playground got hit.
I don't think Playground got hit, but again, like they're going to be, they're already working on 2 projects internally. They were working on 2 projects at the same time anyway.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't see them being hit because of that. Yeah.
So we'll say 2033. Oh, wait, why did I say that?
No.
2028
for Fable?
No, for Forza Horizon 7.
Oh, Forza Horizon
7. I
7.
think everything that we're talking about now is going to be in that 28, 29, 30 space for the most part. Unless it was something that was already talked about.
That all lines up with Helix, by the way. So if it's sort of like if I'm Xbox, I'm launching a new platform, new piece of hardware.
Mm-hmm.
That timeline you're describing, Khalif, would make sense for me. Like if I'm looking for the most bang for the buck, one thing that I was, I'm saying Xbox was criticized for was the launch of the Xbox, the launch of this console generation didn't have their heavy hitters lined up ready to go. Halo in particular, right?
Mm.
So some of these games you're saying or saying that are predicting could go 2028, 2029, 2023. I mean, that's all within that launch window of Helix.
Well, the thing that is in the mix of all of those conversations is how different will Helix be to develop for? Mm-hmm. I am sure that a lot of those companies currently right now are, see, that changes a lot of it too, only because I feel like with this new mandate that Asha has, we know Jason Ronald's doing a ton of the work on the R&D and has done a ton of the work on the R&D of this new hybrid console. The thing we don't know is what is the spec that they're shooting for. We got a little glimpse of what they're trying to do from a let's help developers with our SDK kind of work towards that understanding of a hybrid system at GDC last year. They had some of those conversations there of like what that's supposed to look like. I don't know when, because even me, I was like, next year is probably when they're going to start getting dev kits in a real way, moving towards what that spec is going to wind up being for Helix. But it sounds like because of the hardware issues, because of the price issues, that's probably going to change or get lessened just to make it more affordable. And then you're running it towards that spec. I don't know how that changes all of the things. The thing that it probably does is make it easier for a lot of these companies to make what they're trying to make, so they're not trying to shoot for the moon. So it winds up in my mind leaning towards being directly Helix-esque launch games or any of that kind of stuff, because it makes sense. Again, these are the biggest games you're going to want to showcase, and you're going to want to put some carrot on the end of the stick to be like, here's the reason why if you're going to spend that $1,200, here's a reason why you're going to do it. I don't know if we're going to get that from a technological standpoint, though.
Do you think though that because we saw this generation, right?
Yep.
Where you had people that didn't upgrade to the next gen. I've talked, Lodge and I've talked about this, where I think where the shift in the console industry is happening is there's no longer that clean break anymore. We talked about our gaming history earlier. Remember, PS1 came out, PS2 came out, you got rid of your PS1, you went PS2, right? Like if you wanted to play the new stuff. That's not necessarily happening now. So do you think that they still support, maybe not the Series S, but maybe a Series X, or maybe they do support the Series S, I don't know. Logic and I have talked about maybe the console spacing mirroring more kind of what we see in PC, where you see a variety of different configurations, GPU, CPU combinations being supported by game developers. Do you think we see that here with Helix and Microsoft supporting some of the older consoles? Because to me, if Asha's mandates to, like, hey, we're not going to lose money anymore, right? And I think maybe Satya has said, hey, we're not subsidizing the business anymore. I don't know if you're going to get that bang for the buck in ROI if you just only release those games on Helix. And I think PlayStation will do the same too. By the way, I think you're going to see that PS6, PS5. some of their first party games at launch of the PS6 also make come to PS5 as well. But do you think that's going to be the case potentially here with Helix and them supporting series consoles?
I mean, they're gonna have to get enough people to subsidize the box anyway. Like, they're gonna have to try to find some hardware partners that are not just only AMD find good ways
Mm-hmm.
um, to get into that space and into that way. But I do think either way, the adoption of the new hardware is going to be a lot less for all the reasons we just talked about, and I think the thing that I have been worried about when all of these conversations came about the P&L and all these things that are being discussed is I feel like the hope that I had for Helix to be um built in a way that shows a vast amount of differentiation is probably gone
Mm-hmm.
because you have to cost cut in a way that is going to minimize some of that. And again, I could be totally wrong, right? I have no idea. I do believe in Jason Ronald because I do think he's really, really freaking smart. I think he's brilliant. But I do think he might potentially wind up being hamstrung with those restraints that are wind up kind of coming into the mix. I don't know how that moves, but I also think that like people are going to stay on the console that they have for a much longer time than they would have
Mm-hmm.
if the price was at a reasonable spot. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just think we're gonna wind up waiting a lot. I think the generational gap is gonna be, we had
Mm-hmm.
cross-gen stuff in this previous generation, the
This
generation that we're
generation,
in
yeah,
now.
yeah,
I think we're gonna see a much longer tail for that conversation,
I
with
agree.
the Helix PlayStation 6 era, in a real way.
Yeah, I think somebody in the live chat asked,
I saw my name in there somewhere. I didn't hear what they
yeah,
said. I didn't
are
see what the
these
question
games
was.
going to be exclusive? And I've argued against the exclusivity thing. I think this is just my opinion. I think the exclusivity thing for them now was to kind of I thought that was kind of a way to appease the core, right? For the time
Mhm.
being. I don't know. Again, you just mentioned P&L. She's talked about like I think this is the point that I think that some of the folks I think you mentioned this earlier when the all hell Asha movement as I called it there was some
Mhm.
of that and they're not paying attention to what she's saying. It's like she's got this mandate to turn this business around, right? And she has blatantly come out and said our business is unhealthy. We
Yeah.
make 3 cents in operating profit to every dollar of revenue. We make what did she say? I think I always forget this
64
number. We
cents to something,
yes,
something like
we've
that.
lost 64 cents for every dollar invested. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And when you and then when you have declining hardware, because we've seen that every financial every quarter when they're reporting Xbox financials, we see the hardware continue to decline. I don't know that exclusivity makes sense for them, given everything that she given that her points about around the business being unhealthy, the profit margins, the 64 cents loss for every dollar invested. I don't think that makes sense if you're trying to make the business profitable and you have declining hardware. Like those that math just doesn't math there. And I don't know whether or not these games that we're talking about now will be exclusive. Um,
I don't think they should, to be fair. Like, I again, if I'm taking off my fanboy hat and I'm looking at it just from a money makes sense conversation, and it's the reason why as much as I get roasted about me still saying that the This Is an Xbox campaign wasn't that bad, even though people drag me for that all the time, which I think is fine. It set them up for the positioning that they actually needed to engage with, which is to be everywhere all the time, because it gives you more spaces to make more money, more revenue, and to enlarge the footprint for the brand. I don't think that you wind up getting that into those spaces with exclusivity because you cap out at a certain amount of purchases at some point, the zeitgeist of the game goes away much faster than it ever did because of the way coverage happens, because of the ways that people play, because of the fact that people don't buy new games even if it's not on Game Pass, the fact that people are playing the same games over and over again. Like there's a lot of that leans into why I don't think exclusives are the silver bullet that I think a lot of people think they are. But also, it winds up being this conversation of, again,
Mm.
if you're looking to try to figure out how to broaden the tent is broadened by getting more people to play it across the space, having those games be really good, and them attaching that to where it came from. And I don't think a
Mhm.
lot of players give a crap in that respect. The conversation about like PlayStation, Xbox games that sold really well on PlayStation has already been proven multiple times. I don't think it's a thing that happens all the time. It doesn't. But there were already some games that sold really, really well on PlayStation, right?
Mm. Forza
And
Horizon, yeah. Yeah.
Forza sold really, really well. I think the discussion of like, oh, well, those people won't buy it. I
Wait,
don't think is true.
Cleve, I don't mean to, I got to ask you a question because this is a debate that Game Logic and I have
Yeah, of
every
course.
week. Do you think Halo Campaign Evolved will sell well on PlayStation 5?
No,
Oh, you agree with Logic?
I
Oh,
don't. I
I
don't.
thought yes. I thought it was.
Well, here's
yes.
the reason
Look,
why.
he's doing his victory laps right now.
Well, here's the reason why. And
Hold on,
again,
hold
so
on.
Good.
Hold on. Let me
Go
go get
ahead.
my Sauconys on.
Get the Reebok
here's the
pumps
reason
out.
why. And I said this on
Yeah.
IGN when I was on. It was like,
Yeah.
we have to understand that, again, if you think about the Gen Alpha discussion,
Mhm.
we are the demo that still has disposable income, kind of, sort of, maybe, hopefully, still, after Captain Trump continues to screw everybody. But like, we still have some disposable income. The young kids don't. And I said this during the conversation around Indiana Jones, which was the cultural relevancy of Halo isn't as big as people think it is. That is a Gen X IP. That is a game that matters to our generation. People who are coming up now don't give a crap about Master Chief. They don't care. And it's okay to say they don't care. And it's okay to make new stuff to supplant the things that people don't care about. But when you then say, basically, that we can't make new things because the market doesn't prove that a lot of people will buy it, and it showcases itself again in some of the newest things that we have from already established studios that are already in the mix, like, you have to then make new stuff. It's the reason, like, when I see people talk about all these legacy IPs and how they want these IPs to come back, I'm the cat in the back of the room who's like, for what? Why are we leaning on the legacy IP because we know that people are just going to buy it for the sake of buying it? That's fine. I get that. But like, if you're not offering new players, new experiences, and new things, they are not going to give a crap. And it doesn't matter if you move that thing over to PlayStation. The curiosity layer is gone in
Mhm.
that respect because they know what that game is already.
This literally sounds like a playback of exactly what I've been saying every episode for the last month.
I don't I get it. Everyone's like, I want Banjo Kazooie. And I'm like, for what?
I don't want Banjo
Stop.
Kazooie.
Stop with these old IPs that no one cares about that you think people care about. They care about it for a very short amount of time, and they don't care about it that much to go out in droves and make that thing financially viable and successful. That's not the different. That's a different thing.
My argument to Logic over this over Halo Campaign Evolved being successful, I just thought that, to your point, Cliff, you mentioned Gen X, the graybeards. We're the big money spenders. There's that data point out there from Circana. You and I talk that you and I've discussed, Logic. What households making what 240, 245, 250, whatever, are the biggest spenders. Drive a lot of the spend in the industry, but I just feel like there's enough of us out there to make this thing maybe chart NPD or just sell well on PlayStation. That was my only argument to Logic, that the nostalgia may push this thing over the finish line. But I don't disagree with you, Khalif. I don't think this game resonates with, let's say, my 12-year-old. I don't. there have been many shooters now that have captivated younger generations more so than Halo. I don't disagree with that. I don't know if look, I think visually, I think Halo Campaign Evolved looks great. I don't know if that underlying game design resonates with modern players, like the younger players. Let me get B Money in here real quick.
Well, here's the. I mean, and here's the buckets across the spectrum, even within the graybeard. So let's just talk about the graybeard demographic. Yes.
Speaking of graybeards, here I want to welcome B Money to the show. What's going on, B?
What's happening, fellas?
What's up, B? So you will have nostalgia hoes who need to play this game on the far right.
Nostalgia hoes?
I did.
He did
I
say
did.
that.
I did.
I almost clutched my pearls for a hot second. Nostalgia hoes
who need to play this game, right? And they're going to buy it. But you have then you have another segment of us who have played that game a half dozen times because it's been remade and it's been remastered, and the gameplay is not going to be anything different. Yes, it packs on another couple missions, and they're moving it to Unreal Engine. But remember, a bunch of people went back through and played like the Master Chief Collection before Halo Infinite came out.
I do remember that, yeah.
So you have that chunk of people. You have another chunk of people, and I'm just talking about the graybeards. So they're one segment. Like, I'm just talking about one demo of the bucket, right? There's two other demos in the bucket who, like Khalif said, for different reasons, don't have any interest in the game.
Sure.
But then you have people who in the graybeards bucket, you have people who I think mistaken premise that swirls around Halo is Halo's a big deal in 2000. What was it? 2001 when it came out, right? Halo's a big deal because it is a competent shooter on console.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that again. On console. It is nothing. I won't say nothing, but it's not something super impressive on PC. PC has had those shooters and it's done shooters very competently, right, through 2001. It's a big deal because it lands on console. It's the first time that a really great shooter implementation has shown up on console. It's been 25 years since then. I don't think a great shooter showing up on a console is like a wackadoodle, right, peacock that nobody's ever seen before. It's not a unicorn anymore. It was 25 years ago, but it's not now. Then the last segment of that bucket of the graybeards is that you have people who played Halo, who were in love with Halo, who've moved on from Halo.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They've played it. It's fine. I don't even know if they came back for Halo Infinite. Like a lot of people in the Halo bucket, first of all, think true Halo is only Halo 1 through Halo 3. Right? Or true Halo is only the Bungie Halos and don't have a lot of regard for the 343i Halo Studios Halo. Right? So you have a lot of, like, even in the graybeard bucket who you're counting on to be the people who drive sales of this thing on PlayStation 5, I think you have a lot of variants of reasons why people even in that bucket aren't going to be interested.
And to be fair, the thing that I think doesn't do this game justice or service for those conversations is even if you put this thing on PlayStation 5, it has no multiplayer. So that kills it in its crib. Mm-hmm. Like if that game had multiplayer in it and it was cross-platform multiplayer, that is a differentiator that makes that more palatable and more exciting to a potential PlayStation fan because I haven't played Halo multiplayer before because it wasn't on my console. That is a much different value that you're bringing to that other platform and to that other community. Is like, all those years where you were like, yo, I will clap you in some Halo. Like, you then have the ability to actually settle that score in a real way. And them not putting multiplayer in this is a big detriment to where I think that is. Now, mind you, again, speaking towards the next Halo, whatever that's going to wind up being, I think this is the canary in the coal mine to get the engine in a good spot to be able to showcase it so that when that game comes out, that will have multiplayer, like the Halo the fan fest thing that they do. Maybe we get a glimpse of what new Halo is going to wind up being at that, because it is a multiplayer centric kind of fan fest that they're going to be doing with competitions and stuff. That's a perfect place for them to showcase, oh, we're not going to put it in this, but if you're really hyped for a Halo multiplayer, here's what we have coming. Here's a sneak peek. We'll do an exhibition with some streamers and some esports kids, and then do it there and showcase it. That builds a ton of hype for what Halo could be if you then say we're going to make that multi-platform. But again, that's a window that is not here, and we don't know yet, so we can't tell.
But hey, Brett, let me turn the question around on you, because this is the epiphany I had today. What would our conversation be if the first Halo showing up on PlayStation 5 was Halo Reach?
I would actually be more excited for a Halo Reach than Halo Camp. Reach to me is the best Halo.
So this is my thing that I was thinking of today. I was like, you know, how would they have like stuck the landing on PlayStation 5? Maybe you take this opportunity, if you are going to go back in the lore and you're going to start telling this story to, you know, arguably a new demographic, right? Introduce it to a new platform. Why not take this opportunity to go ahead and tell it chronologically and start with Reach?
Reach would be Reach would be the
I think you would get a lot more right on PlayStation 5 going that way. You would get a lot more people excited. You'd have a lot more people who haven't played Halo Reach like 6, 7, 8 times already. And it would be a great place to ground the series. And then also for whatever comes next, like Khalif was saying, I think you actually open up the aperture on what that could be, because you could go back and do more prequels. You could do asynchronous stuff that was like around the same time as Reach, but maybe happening somewhere else in the galaxy. You know, you have lots of different opportunities, you know, I think to move the series forward then.
B, I would have wrote B into the conversation here. B, what are your thoughts on Halo Campaign Evolved? Do you think it will sell well on PlayStation 5?
I think initially, you know, the first month and a half, it'll probably do well, but I think it's going to drastically fall off after that. You know, kind of like the guys were saying, there just isn't a big enough audience for the game. And you know, I'll just reference my kids. You know, I have a 19-year-old and 17-year-old. Like, they could care less that Halo is coming. You know what I mean? They kind of have their games that they're into. And, you know, I try to introduce them to new games and like new shooters and things like that. But they'd rather play Destiny. They'd rather play Rainbow Six. They'd rather play, you know, the stuff that they're into. And they just have no interest. So I think that kind of, you know, goes along with what the guys are saying. I just don't think that the younger audience is going to be really in tune for Halo and, you know, just a lot of the older IPs. You know, that's why I've always kind of hoped that these studios kind of moved on and bring something new to the table, because, you know, you can only, you know, try to hold on to that nostalgia for so long.
Yep.
So does everyone think that Halo, because I forgot who said this is them, maybe it was you, Logic, this is them introducing Halo to potentially new audience, right, on PlayStation. But I also think if they're doing that, then they're probably getting folks ready for the next iteration of Halo, the next Halo game. But has Halo kind of run its course? I mean, it's kind of been the same design paradigm with Halo. And then I often think, when I think about they've gone back to the well so many times with Halo, design paradigm really hasn't changed. They've tweaked some things here and there, right? But generally speaking, it's Halo. Do they need to do something drastic? And when I mean drastic, I'm thinking God of War 2018. I remember hearing rumblings of God of War when Sony was working on it. I'm like, I don't know if God of War really works, you know, in the, you know, 2017, 2018 time frame. I don't know if that design still resonates or is going to work well, if people are going to want something like that, because at that point the design game design had moved on from, you know, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3. It had evolved, become a bit different. Games have the taste of gamers had changed. The expectation that gamers have of game design around action adventure games have changed, because there have been other games that introduce new refined design elements into newer games. And then we get 2018, it's a complete different design paradigm of God of War. Does Halo need something like that to maintain its relevance in the gaming space? That reaction says it all, Khalif. I'm
Well-
assuming you think it probably does that.
The answer is yes, and the fans won't let it happen. That's the real answer.
They need to stop listening to the fans, Khalif. I have
Well,
been adamant of like stop listening to those diehard Halo fans. Remember when they introduced Jump, they went crazy. Oh my God, like Master Chief's jumping. Like, what are we doing here? No.
Yep.
But go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, you totally nailed it. Again, there are, I am sure, multiple versions of the Halo universe, and again, ODST is a version of that conversation, Reach is a version of that conversation that got raked over the coals because it deviated from the idea of what the formula was.
Even Halo 5.
And even Halo 5, some of the most interesting and fun games in the mix.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that got the most backlash from the fans. So again, nostalgia is killing innovation all the time. And it winds up being a problem if you are a person who wants to see these universes do something new, interesting, and fun. And they are going to do it again to whatever this winds up happening in the Halo space. If Halo winds up having, and they're kind of introducing some of that stuff in the edition that's coming out, like third person camera, like there are things in there that I think could be really interesting in that world, and having hybrids of those things in there that is going to get poo-pooed by the fans, and the fans are going to ruin it for everybody. So that's, if you wanted an answer, that's the answer. The fans are going to screw it up for the people who want it to be different and new.
They're going to root it for everyone else. I mean, I don't even think they cared for the in Infinite for the grappling hook, right? I think
No,
they
people
guessed
got mad at that too.
I actually like the introduction of the grappling hook.
It was dope.
Yeah, introduce a new way for Master Chief to traverse through the maps. Like, okay, cool.
Yep.
What's wrong with that?
Yep.
But people didn't like it. So, yeah. What about you? What do you think, B?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Halo fan, but I think what they kind of do with Halo 5, I think, is where they should have kind of continued to evolve the overall gameplay. A lot of people were hating like the speed boosts and like the jetpacks and things like that, but I think to me that's where the game should have kind of evolved and kind of introduced it to new audiences, because I think when you look at what other games were doing in the space as far as Call of Duty with Black Ops and things like that, those games became more popular over time as they continue to embrace different play styles. And I think even the introduction where they kind of had like the different classes of soldiers is something that they could have kind of leaned into and kind of got away from the whole arena aspect and kind of evolved the gameplay. So I mean, I wish they kind of went that direction, but I don't think that they will.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would move. Khalif, I know you gotta get going here in just a bit. I do want to get to.
Brad, I do want to. You got a super chat. I think you.
Oh
didn't.
yeah, that's right. Let me grab the super chat. Street Shadow 20 with the $10 super says to agree with Khalif, the same nostalgia peeps who call for old PS3 games like Resistance, Killzone, or Mag. I'm from that era. I love them, but people didn't even care about those games then. Why now? Gosh, I feel old now. I feel old. Like I love those games.
There are parts of those. There are parts of that era that I do think should come back. Right.
So
because they've had room to breathe.
SOCOM.
Yeah, they had, again, that's the reason why I talked a lot about IP fatigue, right? And that's the thing I'm worried about on the Xbox side. SOCOM absolutely should make a comeback in a big way. It's these are the easiest layups that you could possibly do. Warhawk in this day and era with the technology we have now would be ridiculously good and be much better than even what Helldivers was in that respect. Killzone, I think, would actually really be a smart thing to come back to, as opposed to another Horizon game. But again, these are the moments when the fans ruin it, because I'm like, they don't ask for the things that they should, and they're like, no, I want a new Astrobot. And I'm like, you're all on crack. I love you. And that game is great, but like, you can put the pipe down and try something new to get yourself high. It's not that
the pipe down.
But
how much of this, Khalif, how much of this though is symptomatic of the industry overall, where when you start introducing games that run, 100 million, 200, 300 million dollars, people are looking at those balance sheets or that, the numbers and saying, well, look, if we're going to spend this kind of money, we want a sure bet. And I think that is why we're seeing, these games being regurgitated. I agree. I'd rather see a Killzone from Guerrilla over the next Horizon. Not that I didn't like Horizon, but I'm kind of a bit fatigued with Aloy at the moment.
Yep.
But I think part of it's the money too. It's like, okay, if we're going to spend this amount of money, we need a sure bet.
Yeah. Everyone is going, everyone again, from, from Concord to Beyond Good and Evil 2, which is never coming out, to
I'm convinced that game's never coming out too.
It's never coming out. I don't believe it. Right. Even though they're still working on it. Splinter Cell's never coming back out. But again, everyone is risk averse. We are in the most risk averse era than we've ever been in. And the things that we do wind up getting that, aren't necessarily hitting like Marathon in the ways that I love that game. And I think that game is great, is probably not going to make it. Right. I think High Guard was actually pretty innovative, but it didn't make it. Right. There are tons of stuff that I think is going to be in the mix for games that I think are going to try something new, and they're going to fail because the audience didn't show up, and because we are so risk averse that you're going to get so many few new ideas. We're literally just going to run ourselves into the ground with remakes. And we're not going to find new stuff, or they're not going to pick the stuff that we could have been playing around with, like the ones that we just talked about, the Killzones, the Warhawks, the SOCOMs, that kind of stuff that, again, should be slam dunks in terms of bridging nostalgia, having new versions of it that are technologically different and can use the technology that we had when we saw the inklings of how good they could have been, but they were probably a little bit too early. And now we're not going to be able to get those things because no one's going to want to spend the money on it to do the development work for what those things are going to take to make them good.
Khalif, let me ask you this.
What's good?
Do you think that there's a possibility that budgets can be scaled back or kind of cut in half? Can we get back to a point where, some of these big publishers, big developers are making these $300 million games? Can they make those same games at $200 or $200 million or 175 or 150 million and kind of get the same results?
You could, but you have to move development into the different parts of the country, and that's the thing, that
parts of the most offshore it. Yeah.
Again, like that's the thing, is like when people talk about outsourcing your development, that's a part of it, and a lot of that's already happening, and you're still getting very, very big budgets. I think you do, but you have to truncate scope, and you have to truncate features, and you have to make a thing a little bit less grandiose in terms of your wants and needs of what that game can be. You can absolutely do it. Like there are games that have come out that are shots in the dark that no one expected them to be good. Expedition 33s. It doesn't really happen in the multiplayer section because that's very hard to do in terms of like the multiplayer shooter space. And sports games are just very, very expensive to do because of licensing and all those other kinds of things. There are some of those things you can do to make those budgets smaller, but the biggest part of why games are expensive is where they are being developed. It's being developed on the coasts. Yeah, you develop them on the coast. And you shouldn't want those games to be cheaper for that reason. Those folks are deserving of the money that they are making, in my estimation. I think those spaces are expensive. But you also want developers to feel like they are being paid in a way that is representative of the work that they get a chance to do for the amount of time you're asking them to do it. No one is waking up every day and working on a project for 7 years and being like, I'm going to try to make a shitty game. No one is doing that. So like, you got to pay people what they're worth, but also you got to move that development around the country to make it work, or put it out in the spaces that are not US centric.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think there's some challenges with and I've seen this internally with their own software teams, their tech teams, that even when you go offshore, sometimes the level of quality work isn't on par sometimes.
And just time zones are just hard.
And the time zones too. Yeah.
Like, oh, you finished that thing. Oh, you did that thing at 2:00 your time in the morning. I'm not going to be up to check your work at 2:00 in the morning. I gotta wait, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of small things in there be money that make that reason like that.
Yeah. So let me I do want to move on to something here, another topic here quickly. Cliff, I know you gotta leave here in about 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
We talked about the rising costs of B just brought up a great point about the cost of game development, which has been a topic that's I think discussed quite a bit over the last couple of years. But also just recently the rising costs of components, hardware, right?
Yep.
This is the first generation where we've actually seen hardware increases towards the end of the generation. It's always been the opposite, right? We've seen the increase of cost of software, $70 games. GTA 6 is going to be an expensive game, although it's going to be a very popular game, I think. There were some numbers about the pre-order. Did it break pre-order numbers? I thought I may have read that today, but it did. Yeah, not Logic saying yeah. So, I think that gaming is kind of a very interesting space, a very interesting position. Console gaming in particular. I think that boom era of console gaming that's done. I think we're hitting a point where the market's becoming mature. I often disagree with folks where some folks are saying, well, the console business is going to die. I don't agree with that. I think there's other examples of mature consumer markets that are still profitable and still healthy. And I think that's probably what's happening now in the gaming. I'm not saying there's zero growth. I just don't think there's going to be this big boom that we saw in the early 2000s or during the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 generations. But that being said, I mean, what are your thoughts about the rising costs of gaming? I think gaming's at a place now. I think there's been a lot of focus on how expensive it is, but I don't think we're talking about we talked about this earlier in the show. We grew up in the 80s, 90s playing video games. I think what often gets lost in that conversation, and I don't disagree, console gaming is getting expensive. The hardware is becoming more expensive. But there's so many entry points now. Like we have more options as consumers than we ever did in gaming. So what are your thoughts about that? Like about the rising cost of console of the console space, multiple entry points, and Logic and I have talked about this. You talked about it, have talked about this with us too. That I think that the consumers, at least in that Twitter space and sometimes in the content creator space, like they look at the console space, console gaming as a consumer product. They look at it in a different lens they do other consumer products that they interact with on a daily basis. And it sort of drives me a bit crazy because I'm like, well, we still have choices we still have a choice as a consumer. Yes, I understand that console gaming is getting more expensive, but there's still cheaper entry points. There's still other options out there, right? And the console space is evolving into this, like you always talk about this Logic, the market's becoming more stratified now. There's different tiers, different levels in gaming now. I don't think that's talked about enough. But I just wanted to get your overall thoughts on the current climate in the console space and in gaming overall, and how we have so many different entry points.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from a lot of the stuff is, it depends on your gaming habit. It depends on your willingness to not have the best thing. It depends. Like, I think the biggest differentiator, not biggest differentiator is not the word that I want. It's the biggest kind of impetus for the conversation around the expensive nature of gaming is twofold. One, it is absolutely growing in so many different ways in terms of how much things cost. That's a overarching discussion that is still not kind of found its floor yet. Like, it's going to continue to get more expensive in the next year or two. People are nostalgic for a time that no longer exists, even though they don't recognize that it was even more expensive in our day. I remember how much it cost to buy a Neo Geo cart. That was wild expensive. In a way that if you told people the prices now, they'd be like, yo, you are bugging. I would never spend that amount of money on a game cartridge ever in my life, right? Gaming apparatuses are becoming more subsidized in the ways that we think about them. Even if you think about it from a mobile gaming perspective, most of your phones are being subsidized through the carrier that you're with in the ways that weren't in the space when we first started to find mobile gaming as a thing. Um, so I think it depends on a lot of that. I think the biggest factor in a lot of those things is FOMO, and people don't want to admit to it. Is that the fear of missing out is driving people's spending habits in a way that sometimes is unhealthy, sometimes is in the conversation that we're now seeing with physical and digital conversations of like secondary markets or spaces to be able to kind of capture some of that stuff. Um, but it is a very expensive hobby. Like that is never going to not be the case for gaming. It is going to be expensive, especially if you're trying to game at the highest levels in with the most fidelity with the kind of spaces that you want. I know I'm running 2 PCs in this studio. Both of them have 4090s in them. Like that is not cheap in
No.
comparison to where most players are at, but also you can play on 720p or 1080p in so many different ways currently right now that are infinitely cheaper,
You're
right?
Mhm.
you're part of the problem, Khalif.
Oh, I'm 1,000% of the problem. But you know
Yeah,
what?
Khalif,
This is
you're the one. You're the one driving up GPU prices, by the way.
I mean, look, I'm trying to get a 5090 in one of these back, and at least the
See, there
gaming
you
one.
go. There you
I
go.
I ain't gonna lie about it, but at least I can write that mother sucker off, right? I
Yeah,
can write
yeah.
that off of my taxes. Is a
There you
business
go.
expense. But I'm also not I also understand the fact that like everyone's budget is tighter. If you have kids, if you have people that you look after, everyone wants this thing to be affordable, and it's not going to be affordable with all the other elements and factors that are in that space. So you're going to have to try to figure out good ways to supplement that stuff, either through other activities, through finding good ways to the weird thing about the GameStopification of stuff is that even with physical things going away, the thing I used to consistently do was when I was trading up and going up to systems that I had before, I was keeping everything that I owned in pristine condition because I wanted the most trade-in value for
Yeah,
what that was going to wind up giving me towards the next purchase of the thing that I was trying to do. And I'm like, there are options
yeah.
in all of those spaces, but again, it's going to be really hard. um, it's gonna suck for a little bit for a lot of
Mhm.
people who are really looking for this to be their and is their main avenue for enjoyment and their main way of connecting and their main way of being in community with a lot of people. Some people are gonna be left behind in that space, and sometimes, hopefully, it's kind of the beauty of the the gap in the gen, right? In that cross gen moment, it's kind of this thing that's keeping everybody together is cross-gen now, because people are not necessarily getting left behind, but they are losing out on some of the features of that new thing, but still having the community of the old thing. So I would say again, and I'm advocating for that. I'm not telling anyone to go buy a PlayStation 6 or an Xbox Helix out the gate. I have to think about that as a person who is doing this work, secondarily, right?
Yeah.
Of am I going to, hopefully fingers crossed, and again, I'm doing this stuff in a different way. I would love for Xbox or PlayStation to send me a console for review and that I can then have as my console for that stuff. There are very few people on the planet who can say that and do that. And that's okay to say that out loud, but like I also understand that if not, I have to come out of pocket and do that and figure out a way to pay for it. If I really want it, or I gotta wait. But it doesn't feel like the wait is gonna move us into a space that's gonna get cheaper as, like you said, Brat, earlier, everything is getting more expensive and none of those prices are going down. So,
Mhm.
we're in unprecedented times in some ways,
Yeah.
but also not in others. Y
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's, I think that's the part that's unsettling. I think for a lot of people, it's that we 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 got used to the idea that the hardware would always become cheaper towards the latter part of the generation, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like now if you're someone that's kind of on the fence, right? Now it's like, okay, well, I might get priced out now. And what does
Mm,
that mean for my gaming habits or how I game? So I understand that. I understand that concern. But I also do think that we don't discuss or talk about the ways that gaming is more accessible and even cheaper in some cases. Like, and some people are going to have to make difficult decisions. You have a 4090. It's funny. I was always for since the 20 series cards, I was always on I was 2070, and then I upgraded to 3070, and then I held off. I did skip the 40 series generation of GPUs, and I was like at a point where like, okay, like component prices are going up, and so is it time for me to upgrade to my PC? And I actually I got a 5080. I actually got a pretty good deal on it. Looking in hindsight, looking back at it now, the PC that I purchased is like $800 more now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yep.
So, but I do think people are going to have to make choices though. Like there are other options in the market. Some folks are going to have to look at maybe Nintendo Switch 2 as an option. I said this to Game Logic. I think you said no, that's not really a viable option. I think cloud gaming, but I suggested maybe people look at cloud gaming or gaming on your phone. I mean,
It's gotten much better. It's gotten a lot better.
Well, I've heard good things about Nvidia's cloud gaming. Like I heard that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's just interesting times, right? Like I don't recall a time where we've seen the cost of hardware go up. I don't think it's ever happened. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's ever happened in my lifetime.
And I think it's just going to get worse.
You think it's going to get worse? I think I'm a little more optimistic. I think it's going to base it. I think at some point it's going to just at some point the consoles, I think next generation, I think we'll probably see $700 consoles as the new norm. I've heard people say 1,000. I don't know. Again, I'm optimistic. I think things settle down. I could be wrong. maybe consoles at 1,000.
I mean, I think the geopolitical space is going to really determine all of those conversations in a real way.
That's a great point. I don't disagree.
Yep.
And
I think if we
2 years
go to war,
2 years we may have the geopolitical climate may change in 2 years, hopefully.
I mean, look, we get Barack to run again, and then he'll make all the consoles like $400. it'll be like the Obama phones, but it'll be like Obama consoles.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's me. I'm a bit more optimistic. I see a lot of people saying $1,000. I just 1,000 is.
That's the tech is asking for. I mean, look how much a new iPhone costs if you do not get the subsidized amount.
But do you think?
Think about that.
No, I know $1,000. I mean, I know people that pay $1,200, $1,300 for a new phone out of pocket.
Yeah.
But do we think that maybe consoles like that's like I know Xbox had that plan where you could basically like pay Microsoft whatever X amount of dollars a month, I think, to an Xbox.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a thing that we see across the board. I don't know.
I mean, if my non-financial advisor advice, we got too many black people already in debt. Get your behind out of debt and don't go put yourself in debt for a new Xbox Helix or for a PlayStation 6, because them prices are going to be what they are, and then you see the interest rate, you're going to be like, yo, I'm paying for this like I'm paying for my college degree. Don't do it.
Oof.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, Xbox All Access. That's what it was called. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Logic B Money, any thoughts on the rising price of the rising cost of gaming?
Yeah, man, I think this is just going to be a new norm. I think we rarely see prices go down once the new standard is set. So I think whatever the prices launch for next generation, that'll be the new standard, and going forward, it'll probably continue to go up from there. But 700 is optimistic. I was thinking closer to 800, maybe 850. But if we get to 700, that'll be nice. But I don't think that's actually realistic. Just based on all the stuff that we've seen leak over the last few months, and then kind of what we think the Helix is supposed to be. I just can't see that being $700. So 800, 900 will probably be the norm going forward, and it'll definitely price some people out. But I think the fact that we do have this cross-gen thing going on, people will still have access. So as long as you have a console now, I mean, you'll still have access to thousands of games for foreseeable future. So I think people will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me grab the super chat here before we wrap up. Street Shadow with the $10 super chat says last 2 games of the year, both from smaller studio budgets in Japan, Astrobot and Expedition 33. That needs to be the balance. Sitting alongside big budgets. Also, Warhawk live service equals awesome. Yeah, thank you for that super chat, Street Shadow. Logic, do you have any additional thoughts before we wrap up the show around the cost of games or gaming?
No, I mean, I've written about it at length and podcasted about it. You guys can go various places and read about the great age of affordable gaming is over. You can also read about the deterministic multi-generational console market model, 2 pieces that I've written recently and podcasted about. So yeah, I've expressed those thoughts pretty well, I think.
Yeah. All right, Cleve, I want to give you your flowers here and say thank you, sir, for joining us. Go Knicks, by the way.
Let's go.
Yeah, it was great having you on. Please let everyone know they can find you as well.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for having me. It's always great to have the thing I love about spaces that we get a chance to chop it up like this is like, man, there's so very few places to have smart conversations about games anymore.
Yeah.
So it was really nice to be able to dig into things in a very, very nuanced and smart way. Y'all can check out any of the stuff that I'm on Spawn on Me. We usually do a show every week. I'll have a new episode I'm recording this weekend. I'm a little bit sick, so I've been holding off. And that stuff goes out usually every week. I'll be back home in New York next week at Games for Change, doing a panel talking about what it's like to work in the content creation space and then moving into working at a studio, doing that stuff. What is it? What did Krypton say? Khalif isn't so bad when he's not shilling for Xbox on RGN. Hey, I am just as good here as I am there. It's not my fault you can't see it. Anyway. And then also I'll be at the National Urban League the week after that doing another conversation around gaming there. So if you're in Nashville, come through and come say what's up. But word, all those goodies are coming up very, very soon. Check us out on Spotify, YouTube, all podcast platforms. And word, hit me up. If you got some stuff to talk about games, you know where to find me on the internet. So come hit me up.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Khalif, for your time. Really appreciate it. We definitely got to get you back on. Great. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. So, B, I don't know if you want to be found. I know previous weeks that I've asked you said no, but I'll give you the opportunity again.
No, you ain't got to find me. But no, it was great to talk to Khalif again. He probably doesn't remember, but we met years ago at E3. Standing in line, I believe, getting ready to play Gears, and
you were absolutely. As soon as you said B Money, I was like, I know who that is.
Yeah. So always great conversation. Always brings great insight to gaming, and always love the topics that kind of brings to the table. So it's great to talk to you again, and hopefully I'll be back around here next week, depending on what the kids got going on. But great conversation tonight, guys, and everybody have a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, B. Logic, I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let everyone know they can find you as well.
Yeah, no. Anybody who needs to find me knows where to find me.
All right,
I know what it's like. Everybody in the witness protection program but me. It's fine. It's okay. I know how it goes.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny. And I want to thank everyone in the live chat for joining us this evening. Really appreciate the support as always. Do me a favor, do the YouTube thing, hit the like button. If you do, consider subscribing and hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. And you can find me here every Wednesday night. We typically go live Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So everyone enjoy your weekend. Have fun playing video games because ultimately that's what it's about. And we'll see you here next week. Thank you again for watching.